The broadcast is live. Here we go.
Hello.
Here's something I just wanted to show you. That I don't know what this is. I think it's from the Comics Buyer's Guide. Do you know who Scott Roberts is?
Scott Roberts.
He did a comic. He did a comic in the 90s called Patty Cake. I think he self-published most of it, and it was
the same art style as like I can't think of the fellow's name. I can see his art in my head. I can't think of his name.
It's Peter Bagg-ish.
Yeah, exactly. That's who I was thinking of. Yeah.
Right. And it's an all ages comic, and it was really good.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever read it or not, but that title and that art style sound familiar.
Well, I was
looking at there.
Yeah, here are some of his art. This is sketchy art. I like it. I don't know.
Okay, so that's cut out from an article, or
I think it's a cutout from CBG. I found it on my shelf.
If I could see the font that they're using, I could tell you if it's from CBG or not.
Okay, let's see. There's an ad.
I can't tell. I mean, the EC ads. Yes, that is from CBG.
Yeah, I think it's CBG.
I can tell just from the font that they're using.
And so I was looking for my car manual on my shelf, which is filled with comics and books. Good evening, Sunflower Narvel. Where's Motor? Getting home from work. He's motoring home from work. And I found I haven't reread it yet. What does it say? When Patty Cake and Meep and Patches comic book defenders creator Scott Roberts read the ongoing debate in Oh So regarding late shipping small publishers, he began a letter of response. Then he changed his mind. Instead of the planned later, he sent a 7-page comic book essay completed before we received the majorities of letters which came into our offices. We despaired of being able to present it properly until we realized that this 200-page issue might let us not only catch up and on some Meep and Patches backlog Roberts sent over the preceding weeks, but also his proactive take on today's comics field. As with all letters, the views presented, the view of the creator, not necessarily reflect those of the publisher. But I was like, I didn't even get a chance to reread it yet. But I was like, look at that! I must have liked this back, I don't know, in the 90s.
Right. Yeah, Oh So was the name of the letter column in Comic Buyer's Guide.
Okay. Oh So, yeah, you're right. I remember that now. There's some 200-page. Oh, hold on. No, that's not anything. That's for the ad. I thought it was an G show.
It was probably an issue that ended in a nice round number, like 1,000 or 1,100 or something like that.
Here we have cutoff date. In the advertising, the cutoff date for ordering the sculptures is 11/3/97. So it must be a 200-page 1997 issue of CBG.
Those were the good old days. I used to love getting that them every week. It's great.
Yeah. I can't remember what years I bought CGC, but it must have been in 97.
I don't remember what year I stopped and started. I still have a bunch of them in a storage tote somewhere.
Oh, there's Paolo. There's
Good
Motor.
evening.
Hello.
You must be Motor, whoever that is.
I don't know who Motor is, or who Sunflower and Olive are.
Sunflower, Olive, and Motor is. I don't get that reference, but you're
Motor.
Motor.
It could be oils.
I know it's olive oil. If one of you is olive oil and one of you is Popeye, I can be Wimpy. Maybe.
He'd gladly pay us Tuesday for a hamburger.
Yeah. Well, there's olive oil, there's motor oil, and there's sunflower oil.
I was just showing off something I found. Have you ever heard of Scott Roberts? He was a cartoonist who did a comic strip called Patty Cake, or a comic called Patty Cake in the 90s. And it was a really good all-ages comic. So the art was sort of Peter Baggish. But I was looking on my shelves for my car manual. I still have Cannabidol on reserve. and I found this. I must have cut it out in '97. That there's a date on it, and it's a Scott Roberts comic strip that was a response to their letters column stuff. So there's like I think he said it was a 5 or 7 page little comic strip on late indie comics in '97. I guess there was a debate on if indie comics should be late or not. I don't know. But I didn't get a chance to reread it. I wish I had. Comics are dead.
Some pretty good ongoing strips in Comic Buyer's Guide way back in the day.
Yeah. Yeah, like I was late to buying Comics Buyer's Guide. I must have started. Let's see, how old was I in 1997? I was 31. So I was probably, in my late 30s. I'm in my late 20s before I finally got a subscription to this, I would imagine. I always wanted one, but it was being a weekly newspaper. It was an expensive subscription. The graphic,
they had like 4 different
Graphic
options
Man.
for shipping too. Like you could get it first class or
you could only buy it for the leasing, because I believe the subscription was somewhere under $100. I don't think it was over $100.
No, it was like, I think for a year it was like
70 or 80.
it was less than that.
It was less. Whatever it was, any other magazine monthly magazine would cost you between $10 and $15. And CBG was over 50, I think. It was 50 or 60. I can't even remember.
It came out every week. So.
It was not. If you bought it from the stands every week, it was $4 an issue or something like that.
Yeah. So we have Graphic Man here, and Graphic Man is now the place to be every Wednesday night.
Oh, okay. Is that the show you do?
Yeah. There were 9 of us there, including Captain Strangelove. Charlton 66 was also there.
Wow. On the show?
On the show.
Broadcasting? Wow.
Yeah.
What time?
At 6. Was it 6? Was it 5 or 6?
Which time zone?
Yeah, because Graphic Man is in Texas, and I always have to remember. So I came in at 1 a.m. of my time, and we started at 10.
So Texas is Central Time, I think.
6, 7. No, we started at 8. 8
Eastern.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wednesdays at 8 Eastern.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll have to check that one out sometime. Graphic.
Yeah, and everybody's starting to watch it now. And this week we had. You're in Missouri, right? It's Grotto who's in Texas.
Missouri, Texas. What's the difference?
Yeah. Well, you're from New York.
Jackson, and they'll tell you.
Well, you're from New York, so to you, everywhere that is not New York, yeah, it's like you say, I'm already in New York. Why do I want to go somewhere else?
But I'm in the suburbs, so I'm not a real New York City person. I know I can drive places, so I know places around.
Yeah, you're not a real New Yorker. It's almost like you're from Jersey.
Yeah. That's the real reason that New Yorkers don't want to go other places, because they're too close to New Jersey.
Yeah, we had an outer space theme this week, and we all showed some very cute science fiction comics.
That sounds cool.
And me being the foreign correspondent, I pulled out Exterminator 17, which was serialized in heavy metal back in the day.
Heavy metal.
England would be heavy metal.
We have the Halloween special of Comic Shop News this week, too. Another Fred Hembeck cover.
Yes, it's Hembeck, yeah.
With the Hulk saying, I wanted a pumpkin, not a pumpkin head, right? Hulk want pumpkin pie, not pumpkin head. So I find it amazing that Fathom is still going.
Is that a new number 1?
Yeah, that's a new number 1. That's Aspen Matthews, born of two worlds, must reconcile her ocean and land lives in Fathom the Core, #1, by Vince Hernandez, Mark Roslin, and Alex Kanat. But she's about to learn that not all creatures from below or above are seeking peace. I'm like, wow, I'm amazed that keeps going. I never see an issue of Fathom. I never see Fathom on YouTube.
I haven't either. But you know, if there's going to be some kind of underwater action scene, there's going to be a giant cephalopod somewhere.
Yeah. Well, what I don't get is who keeps publishing Fathom now since we lost Michael Turner?
It's Aspen.
Yeah, but
which was his publishing house.
Yeah,
right?
that was his publishing house. Whatever. Imprint.
But it just amazes me that it's like I don't know who's buying Fathom.
Can't fathom it.
Yeah, I can't fathom it. I don't even see. I would say about 4 or 5 years ago, I saw a lot of people on YouTube collecting Michael Turner stuff, Michael Turner covers especially. And I think his website even had, like, he did. He knew he was dying, and he did a lot of stuff in advance to publish after he died. Mm-hmm. So he did stuff like, Marvel and DC covers, without even, just sort of on spec. He wasn't even getting paid for them. He was just doing them, and eventually Marvel or DC may have used them as an alternate cover. But even that's, I don't see anyone on YouTube showing off Michael Turner art, let alone a Fathom comic not done by Michael Turner. Though it just fascinates me. I wonder who's buying it. Because I often wonder who's buying these comics that I never see.
Yeah, it's like those people who were still buying Cerebus at the end, or people who... That was you. Or those people who kept buying Spawn. Or the people who bought Spawn number 299 because everybody only came back for 300.
I started Spawn just a few months ago at like 315.
Yeah, it was somebody's hanging on.
But Spawn is huge again. Spawn is selling 100,000 copies or somehow. 300 really put it back on the map. So at least that I understand. I understand why Spawn is doing good. And there's 4 new Spawn series and Spawn. At least that I get. I see it in the he also made Spawn returnable. So my comic shop gets in 30 copies of Spawn where it used to get in 2, and there were no shelf copies.
It'd be interesting seeing how many he actually sells.
Yeah, I don't know, but he can get in 30 and return 20. And that sells more than when he had to pay for 2 and sell those 2. So I find that pretty interesting. Like, that who's buying Fathom? I don't know. My shop has never even had a shelf copy of Fathom. Yeah. Never seen one.
There are some series that they keep getting they stop publishing the original series, but then they try to bring it back. Because a few years ago, when they reprinted the original John Sable Freelance series, they did 2 new miniseries. And who the hell wants to buy these miniseries? Because they don't feel the same. I mean, no. We had all this time between the series ending and now restarting. Grell's not the same person. Not that his art is bad, because it isn't. But yeah, it's not the same thing.
Grell also does have enough of a fan base. It's not as like a Jim Lee big, but it's big enough to where they can do that thing from time to time.
Yeah, but it's like
I don't know how much fan base he has anymore.
Yeah, but like Nexus, every once in a while they put out a new miniseries.
Yeah, it's been a while. I bought Nexus.
There are lots of Nexus things coming within the next couple of years.
I bought some of those Nexus things, and I also bought when they relaunched a couple of Grimjack series because Timothy Truman was drawing them, and he hadn't drawn Grimjack. But the Mike Grell, I just wasn't interested in that particular one anymore, so I didn't buy any of the new John Sable Freelance.
A couple of friends of mine actually do a Mike Grell podcast.
Yeah? Wow.
Yeah.
Nice.
I know he, I used to see his art a bit. There's a comic shop called Catskill Comics, which I guess is up in the Catskills here in New York. I don't know, maybe 100 miles from me, maybe less. And they represented Mike Grell, I think. So, and they used to put stuff. I haven't looked in a long time for that much original art on eBay, but I think they used to post Mike Grell stuff. And Ron Friends, I think, was another. I actually bought a couple of Ron Friends things because they weren't expensive from Catskill Comics. But I think he lives up there too. He's one of the Hudson Valley guys.
Gotcha. There's another YouTube channel called Sea of Tranquility, which is a music-based channel. They're based in the Hudson Valley. And I just looked up the Hudson Valley, New York. Man, that's a gorgeous place.
Yeah.
The country's gorgeous. It actually reminds me a lot of the geography and everything around here.
Yeah. Hudson Valley's a nice place, and once they stopped poisoning the river, and I don't know, I think they stopped in the 60s or 70s finally, and it got better.
So you can actually swim in the Hudson now?
Yeah, I think you can swim in the Hudson. You can't yet eat fish out of the Hudson.
Okay.
But you don't want to swim in the Hudson because people drown there, because the Hudson is a tidal river.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, at least not down in my area of the Hudson. When the tide comes in, the river runs north in the middle of the river and south on the sides of the river. When the tide goes out, it reverses. So you can get caught up in the tide and drown. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to swim in the Hudson, stay near the shore, because it's usually people on boats who go swimming who end up drowning in the Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I actually live near what's called the New River, which is ironic because supposedly it's the second oldest river in the world. How you determine that, I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I don't know.
So, but yeah, it's got this weird thing where it flows in an odd way, and a lot of people drown there when they're going inner tubing.
Mm-hmm. But I tell you something. I live near the beach. I can go swim in the ocean, no problem. You cannot pay me enough to swim in a river. And I notice people who live in the countryside and they don't have beaches, so they have to go to the river, and they don't really understand how water flows.
Right.
And those.
Well, I've always heard, like, not that I know, and you always hear about the old swimming hole, and that's usually either a point in a point in the river where it calms down. And if you don't have a swimming hole, you don't want to go swimming in the river.
Yeah.
Where it's all of a sudden very deep and the water stops.
Well, not only that, but you have to worry about it being clean, like you were talking about. Make sure there's not a chemical plant 30 miles up the road. Mm-hmm. And you also have to worry about snakes.
If we were Fathom, we could just swim anywhere because we could breathe in the water.
Yeah. It would be super strong, so we can swim against a tidal river.
I think I've read one or two Fathom comics. I don't even remember them. Mm-hmm. Don't even. But we got two comic shop newses this week because we've got the fall preview and we've got the regular comic shop news, which is all about the Book of Sorcery from Archie.
I really don't understand Archie nowadays, because they're coming out with these type of books. Like they had a Archie 1940 series and the Archie 1950 series, and they were more serious. And I even saw the French trade paperbacks of those series.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not sure, because
usually that
foreign publishers don't care about Archie.
Right. Chilling Adventures in Sorcery launched in 1952 with 5 issues originally. So I didn't realize that they put some stuff out like this in the early 70s. Where Archie makes its money in the U.S. is supermarkets.
Yep, those little digest-sized magazines.
Right. Mm-hmm. They pay because they pay for product placement, and they can get the Archie digests on the checkout line. So that, and I know that was their bread and butter for years and years and years.
I don't see that as much as I used to, but then checkout lines in grocery stores have changed quite a bit in the past 10
right.
years.
I see them on occasion with other magazines, but I wonder too how the self-checkout lines have affected the sales of the checkout line stuff, because there's no stuff along the self-checkout lines. There's no there's no impulse purchase stuff like there is
like
on regular
checkout, and that's the only place there is there.
That's why whenever you hear people say, "Oh, Marvel and DC should get their comics in grocery stores like Archie," it's like, first of all, it's not necessarily easy.
Although the French do sell a lot of comics in the supermarkets, but even as an album format. Although I imagine that they sold more when there were soft covers, because now everything is hardcover.
That's depressing that you can go pick up a European graphic album in a freaking grocery store. But here,
but you can buy. You can't
store here.
Yeah, right, but you can't buy everything. It's just the ones that are already world famous. You can pick up Asterix. You can't pick up those French Conans the French Elrics.
Yeah.
The only thing near those self-checkouts are little mini fridges with soda. I don't even think my local ShopRite even has the mini fridges there. I'm trying to think. No, they got nothing. They got nothing near the self-checkout. I know the mini. They actually might be near the ones. There might be some of those mini fridges near the ones with the belts, but not near the ones without the belts. The quick ones. So an Archie Digest and a normal checkout. Yeah, I'm like I said, I don't see much on those self-checkout.
The last time I saw an Archie Digest was at Barnes and Noble.
I'm gonna have to look next time I go to the store because I haven't looked for them.
I don't think we've ever had Archie in Portugal, and if we did, it would have been for a very short time. I know that they had it in Brazil. They called him Frajola, weird name, but we never had it.
I got to say, good evening to CGC Crack. He's a wheeler dealer now, sending books off to CGC, getting 9.8s. Oh,
what was that?
9.8s or bust.
Was it Batman Beyond? Was that the one?
Yeah. It was he said it was a new comic book day, Batman Beyond, too. I guess that's different from the. That's right. You got a new name.
You can use it on the Sunday show.
Yep. CGC Crack. Here's another one that kind of interesting. It's funny. This is called After Dark. It's an Aftershock Halloween special. It's got it says it's like prestige format. It's got Colin Bunn, Jim Starlin, Joe Pruitt, Frank Thierry, Cliff Richard, Nicole Kellenick, Simon Kodransky, and Joe Eisma.
Frank Thierry?
Format. What was that?
Frank Thierry in this day and age?
I think he's friends with Mike Martz. Or at least they know each other.
Now I get it. Yeah.
First few names are pretty recognizable, though.
I think he probably worked for Mike somewhere along the line.
Yeah, he was a Wolverine writer.
Oh, okay. Prestige format one shot, tailor made for Halloween, presents 4 original tales. So I saw that. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Then I saw somewhere there was, where is it? A giant sized black cat. And none of these things have prices on them. But I was like, I wonder what the prices are on the After Dark prestige format as compared to the giant sized black cat. Because, like, in a normal world, of course, the indie book the small press book would be more expensive. But in this day and age, I don't know. I think if I were taking bets, the Black Cat might be more expensive. The Black Cat giant size might be more expensive than the Aftershock prestige format.
Yeah, there's a lot more price parity these days.
Yeah, there's so much. There's such a variety of prices, and and Marvel and DC are often the highest prices rather than the lowest. That's it. I was just like thinking about that going. Speaking of what was it? The Bad Idea comics that I got a couple of weeks ago. I think it was it was the lot number 3, Pirate Queen number 1 in Monster Kill Squad number 1. I think the lot number 1 was $5. The lot number 3 was $5. Pirate Queen number 1 was $6, and the other one was $7. I was just like, it's amazing that I can get 3 comics from the same company with 3 different prices like that. It's just kind of like,
None of them cheap either.
No. Well, the comics aren't cheap anymore. That's why I'm wondering which will be more expensive: Aftershock, After Dark, or the Black Cat Giant Size. A couple of indie books and stuff that's 79 price. Yeah. Indie books being $79.99, at least I can accept. Indie books are supposed to be more expensive than regular comic books. But, I mean, $79.99 is still very cheap. They better be beefy. But when Marvel and DC are more expensive, one indie and one DC, now I'm not sure. Exactly.
Yeah, I remember when Marvel was still $225, and people complained about that price hike. And there were indie books in previews, $3.50, black and white, 24 pages.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand that economics.
Right. When I was buying indie books in the 80s, black and white indie book will cost me $2. At the same time, Marvel and DC books were 75 cents. And people would always go, "Where's the color? Why are you paying $2 for a book that doesn't even have colors?" And I'd be like, "Well, the economies of scale. There's only a few thousand copies of this book, and there's 100,000, 200,000 copies of that book. So economies of scale say that this one has to be more expensive, but not anymore. Now Marvel and DC, well, their scale has come down. We got to say that first. Marvel and DC don't have 200,000 print runs anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I understand if they were charging, let's suppose that they have the upmarket position, but they don't. They have the mainstream, and it's like they're charging Ferrari prices for a minivan.
Yeah. Which also I think why circulations are so low. I mean, the only reason they're still making as much money as ever is they raise the prices, because selling 200,000 of a $1 comic is the same as selling 50,000 of a $4 comic. And that's the only reason you always hear about, they're making money, they're okay. It's like, yeah, but they cut their fan base down to a quarter.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that has a lot to do with price.
As time has gone by, especially in the internet age, there's so much more audience fragmentation to deal with now.
Oh yeah,
than there was back then.
I'm sure price isn't the only reason.
And there's another thing. The new generations definitely don't want paper, but they still haven't come up with a good model to make money out of digital comics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Here's my thought for it.
They are available, but they're not making money. Not in a big way.
Yeah. And they're selling to, like those NFTs, they're selling to a very small segment. They're not.
NFTs are not going. They're not going to be a thing. The people want to own the exclusive object that they're paying for, and the notion that you're buying a piece of electronic art that can be erased with a magnet.
I think NFTs are a thing, and they can't be erased because they're what is that bit? But anyway, I think there'll be a thing for a certain segment of people, but not a huge segment.
Mm-hmm.
When you read digital, the next step will be commercial breaks. Yeah.
Oh, God, that's depressing.
My thought for the week, this thought just popped into my head. This probably has something to do with NFTs too, because I think a certain segment of comic collectors will embrace NFTs, but it'll only be in the thousands, maybe 10,000. It won't be a huge number because it doesn't need to be. Because there's such low cost to entry of NFTs that it doesn't take a lot of people to support it.
Just wait till they try to slap the servers.
Yeah. Actually, I left a comment in the Sequential Geek video, and he asked me about NFTs, and I didn't answer back. But to me, they're a scam, and eventually people are going to wise up. So,
but I think people. No, I don't see any particular value in them, but I think people will. And but I can't even sign up for VV. I've been trying to sign up for VV, which sells, and they keep erroring out their server. I'm like, I don't know. But anyway, here's my thought for the week on comic book collecting, which was I hope people never wise up. Come on.
That's how P.T. Barnum made all his money.
Yeah. Here's my thought for the week.
Mm-hmm.
In book collecting, there's a distinction that isn't in comics, but I think should be, between a rare book collector and a book collector. Meaning that if you're a rare book collector, that's what you call yourself. And you're collecting for different reasons. It's like a completely different collection. When you're a rare book collector, you don't care about the latest anything. You're not buying your books to read.
Mm-hmm.
You're buying them to own, for investment, and for prestige.
There's even more subcategories in normal book collecting than there are in comic book collectors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I'm just saying we should have subcategories in comic book collecting, because a rare comic book collector is completely different than a comic book collector.
Mm-hmm. But the market doesn't make that distinction yet, and that's why we have those type of 1 in 250 variants in the space that you just want to buy a comic to read.
I don't think it's the market making the distinction. I just think it's our language.
Language has a lot to do with it, but the people who you consider to be rare book collectors in comics market, they network with each other.
Yeah, I know. They're a completely
how much they network outside their own private little network.
I'm saying they're a completely different group than comic book collectors.
Right.
Just
we'll
like
never actually see a real Action Comics #1. It's outside of our space.
Right. Just like just like book collectors, they just buy books. They're not regular book collectors, just like buying books. Sometimes they read them, sometimes they don't, but they like collecting them, having them on their shelf, reading them, or not reading them, just like comic book collectors. But that's a completely different behavior than rare book collectors. And also, like, when you're a rare comic book collector, condition is everything. Everything. When you're a regular comic book collector, not so much. When you're like to me, I don't care about condition that much. If I buy my new $4 comic this week and come home and notice that it's a dinged corner, I'm like, oh well, I got a dinged corner.
But it does infect the way that but it does infect the way that we think about comics, and that's why people are making investments on brand new comics, hoping that they will pay out within the next year or so. When of course you can't do that with a book.
I think there's even another.
That's not necessarily the case.
I'm gonna head up the pervert underground smut comic collectors. I think that there's also a group of comic book collectors, like the key issue collectors, are sort of rare book collector wannabes.
Yeah,
they want to collect rare comics, but they don't have the budget for it.
They don't have $1 million, so but they have 200.
But they have 200, and they can invent rare comics to collect. Like all of these, like what you mentioned before,
1 in 250 variants. 1 in 250 variants, yeah.
Right. You can those are invented for whatever this second category is. I hate to call them, rare collector wannabe. We just call them key issue. The key issue collectors kind of that they want to. If they could, they'd collect Action Comics #1 and Amazing Fantasy #15. I mean, who wouldn't? But they can't, so they collect whatever $200 rare comic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm sure that even X-Men 181 is now outside of their reach, but X Factor 5, Avengers Annual 10, those are still within their reach.
Right. I'm in a time period of collecting gold, silver, and bronze age. I glanced at other stuff enough to be social. But are you a rare comic collector or a key, or are you like... See, I don't want to call them rare comic collector wannabes because that sounds like an insult. And if you're... I have to imagine the graphic man's collecting gold... Golden Age comics. He's not collecting the high-end ones unless he's especially rich. Not key, just love the time periods, right? Well, he could just be a regular comic collector too. But instead of spending $20 on new comics this week, he spends $20 on the Golden Age comic. I mean, that's kind of the same thing, I would say. All right, you have a good night, CGC crack. Where it calls. I must say, when I saw he what did he slab? He slabbed a She-Hulk #1, and I have to say that is one of my least favorite comic books in the world. I really, really don't like that comic.
I have a copy of that. It's not slab
because that came out when I was a kid. And that was the comic. First of all, it's a terrible comic. It's just a bad comic. But that was the comic that made me say the Emperor has no clothes.
I never bought that until I actually started off with John Byrne's She-Hulk.
Yeah, nobody cared.
That for a while, I went back and got the original run.
Although there is a difference between She-Hulk #1 and the rest of the Savage She-Hulk run, because She-Hulk #1 was made by Stan Lee and John Buscema just to secure the trademark, and then they actually got a real ongoing team to keep working on a comic. Still, I've never been interested in it. I only found out about the She-Hulk when she joined the Avengers.
All right, I'm going to leave and come back again because you two are breaking up on me, so I know it's my end. See you.
Yeah, but there are times when you really don't care about those characters.
Yeah, like I said, I bought She-Hulk off the... And another thing that annoyed me, this whole we've got to sell comics to women thing is not new.
Right.
It's been going on as long as I've been buying comics in the 70s. And the She-Hulk and Dazzler were both advertised as, female-led comic books. Here we go. We care about female-led comic books. But as soon as you read them, you knew they didn't. Yeah. You knew that was just a bunch of hokum because they were putting C and D list talent on those comics like right away. I mean, Dazzler #1 at least had John Romita Jr. in the beginning of his career.
Yeah.
And he was starting to be a B-list talent, and that was pretty good. But he was gone by issue 5 or something.
Yeah, and then Frank Springer became the regular, and nobody wants to read Frank Springer.
No.
Especially with Vinnie Coletta doing the inking.
Yeah, they're not really giving it their best to make female-led comics when they put Frank Springer on.
It's funny you brought up Frank Springer because you remember he took over on the Shadow after Mike Kaluta.
Mm-hmm.
And then somebody just earlier today on Facebook had posted a picture of a Shadow comic that was done by E.R. Cruz, which is a different artist. And it's like, oh my God, he's so much better than Frank Springer when he was doing this. They should have got him instead.
Yeah. Girls always bought comics until the mid to late 70s. Then they stopped.
Yeah, but remember, I don't remember when DC made the last girl comic. I do remember when Marvel put out those romance titles that lasted from 69 to 76, and they were just like they were romance titles from the 40s and 50s.
But
And
like
they were still done by Stan Lee.
Girls bought stuff like Richie Rich.
Mm.
That was huge. They sold so many copies of Richie Rich over here in the early till like the mid to late 70s when it petered out. But I mean, they were selling like Richie Rich in the early 70s had like 4 titles a month, each selling 1 million copies or something crazy like that. And that was a lot of girls bought those ones as well as boys.
Reading interviews with different comics creators, female comics creators, and they talked about books they read when they were kids. A lot of them mentioned Archie comics.
Yeah. But somehow by the end of the 70s, little girls weren't buying comics anymore. I don't know why.
Yeah, well,
it's aimed at little boys.
Yeah, there's a kind of a the collector mentality is stronger on men than on women, and the notion of staying with a comic to keep buying the new ones, or trying to or upmarket moves to different genres. It was easier for teenage boys to do that than for teenage girls, because teenage boys were willing to go look for either for those comics that were disappearing from the stands, and just as the direct market was beginning to gain steam. And at the time, girls weren't. There was I think at the time Harlequin novels were a big thing in the second half of the 70s, and they moved over to that. Yeah.
Harlequin romance novels are bigger than the entire comics industry.
Of course.
That's why when I always hear people complain about the comic industry being too male, I'm like, the publishing industry is almost all female. This is the one section of the publishing industry that is male, and people come out. I'm like, come on, Harlequin romance, not even romance novels as a whole, but that one imprint is bigger than comics.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, in
megastores,
boys have something.
Yeah. In megastores, the science fiction fantasy section, in many places, on mainstream places, it was completely taken over by veggie vampires, right. Which were read by women. You were trying to look for elves and spaceships, and they were gone. It was just veggie vampires.
Veggie vampires. It's funny.
What it is comic books have always punched above their weight class a little more in terms of, like, there was a Spider-Man TV show, there was a Hulk TV show, there was a Superman TV show. Harlequin romance novels, even though the novels themselves are bigger than the entire comic industry, they don't break out of their ghetto.
Well, their ghetto was late night Cinemax movies. Just there wasn't an actual marketing association with it.
Well, I'd say it's more like Lifetime movies.
Yeah, there's some of that too. That's true.
But once again, I mean, and Lifetime movies are huge. But they're still not. For some reason, like I said, comic books punched above their weight class and got noticed. Even if people weren't really buying the comic books, they got noticed somehow more than, let's say, Harlequin romance novels, even though they're bigger. So there's more, and that they were almost exclusively male, got noticed more because nobody cares if Harlequin romance novels are all aimed at females. Everybody, that's what people expect. But Marvel comics being aimed at all males, people get nervous about that. That, and Marvel comics would like to sell more comics to women too.
Yeah, but why focus on the superheroes? The superheroes are a type of genre that is clearly aimed at adolescent boys.
I think the focus.
Yeah.
I think that was the only. That was say why focus on superheroes, because the two biggest companies focused on superheroes. That's the only answer.
Well, the two biggest, because the way that the comic book market in North America is set up that it sells in the ghetto to a specialized public. So when you try to reach new audiences, they're not going to the comic shop.
Right.
They will never go to the comic shop.
I mean,
and nobody.
There was so much of this. I won't say a stigma, but there was so much of a ghetto audience, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Where from the early '60s through probably the early 2000s, if you looked at the average guy on the street and said, "You realize that there's non-superhero comics," they looked at you like you had a third head growing out of your back somewhere.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's never been an issue in Europe. I don't even know.
Europe's a completely different ball.
Right. I don't even know what comics there are for women, but I don't need to know. You want to look for something different, another genre, a new art style. You can. That's not an issue.
I actually think it has to do with the infantilization of comics through the Comics Code in the 50s, which we could only make comics for children for 20 plus years, and eventually the only thing keeping comics alive was superhero comics and teenage boys. That was sort of the last. They were the last part of the publishing standing. And I think it was because comics before the Comics Code, comics were growing up with the readers, and then that stopped. So that by the time, who knows why? By the time the distribution wasn't as good. Like you said, boys may have had to seek out comics rather than them coming to them, and the girls just didn't. And there was nothing there for grown-ups to read, so it kind of all funneled down into this superhero thing.
Right, and we talked about this. If you were into underground comics in the 70s, it's not like those were intelligent comics. They were still infantilized, but it was the notion. This is what trying a young kid trying to be grown up by having scat and wannabe porn.
Doing all the stuff that you weren't allowed to do.
Yeah.
Like
you burped, you farted.
I mean, I actually found indie comics fairly early in the late 70s, early 80s, but I had a look. I mean, it wasn't... And a comic shop opened a couple towns over in 1981 when I was 15. But, like, Tim has said before, growing up in Virginia, that was a time when, other parts of the country really were a few years behind.
Yeah,
the big urban centers.
I mean, if you weren't in either New York, Chicago, or LA, or Dallas, Houston, you were left out.
Yeah, you weren't getting indie comics. That's just the way it was.
Yeah. Recently, I had to show my copy of Saber. I have a 30th anniversary reprint, and Saber is not an adult comic. But it doesn't have to be. Saber is something that, if it wasn't for the way that we market stuff in our limited vision of comics in North America, Saber is a comic for everyone. It does have a sex scene, but it's the type of sex scenes that you see in a PG-13 movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but back when it was first published, it was considered scandalous here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be if it was a European comic. That's my point. That's my point.
That's how infantilized comics were over here. It's crazy. It really is nuts. I think we've, like I said, I consider kind of we're only over here. We only started getting out of the Comics Code era maybe a decade ago. Where now you can get comics, because now there's creators who grew up without the Comics Code. So they got nothing to rebel against. They can just make whatever comics they want. That's why when Saga was out, occasionally people would say, "Oh, he's just doing something shocking every few issues." And I was like, "It's not shocking.
Right. It isn't.
It's not the least bit shocking."
And that's why Gore Vidal and I don't like it. We don't find it anywhere interesting. And if you're trying to be shocking, it isn't. It's absolutely normal.
I don't even think he's trying to be shocking. That's just I think he's just writing sex scenes in, writing nude scenes in, just for the heck of it, just because he can, because it's okay now. But people are I've still seen people shocked by it. So, but it's amazing how. But like, what book is it? Crossed. Let's take Crossed for example. Crossed is so far out there that I think that's a post-comic code book in terms of its relentless. How there's a couple of 100 issues of Crossed, and if they were kind of just rebelling against censorship, there'd be 6 issues of it. So I think that's another book that crossed over into the post-comics code era. I thought, but there's a few. I'm trying to think of others, but not a ton.
I just remember the thing, Scott. You were there when Comic Crack showed those Milo Manara comics, Giuseppe Bergman. Yeah. Okay. So Giuseppe Bergman is a Milo Manara comic, and you know what? Everybody thinks of Milo Manara comics. Giuseppe Bergman has scenes where you get a woman losing her dress and she's not wearing a bra, but she has underpants. You couldn't get away even in the 1980s. You couldn't get away with that on TV, but in Europe, that's prime time.
There's something weird. There's something weird. There's a weird visceral reaction people have to naughty drawings, more than even I think photography. I'm not quite sure what it is.
It's because Crack has bought them all, and they're rare. So when they do get out, and other people get to see them, it's a surprise.
Yeah, it's just strange. You could. I've seen like in this day and age, like naughty drawings make more of an uproar than the same stuff in movies or whatever.
Right.
And I think it's just something about drawings that can upset people. Especially, cartoon drawings even can really upset people because it doesn't conform to reality. Photography at least conforms to reality. Drawings don't have to, and can add something extra in there that upsets people.
Right. Think of them as an ideal. People think about them as an idealized format, and if you use it to try to be shocking, you're corrupting it.
Yeah.
Well, also in the United States, there's so much of a mindset even still that comics and animation are just for kids only. That when you see something that has nudity in it, that's even more shocking on top of what shouldn't be.
What shouldn't be. So let me show off one of my comics from this week. I only got 4 of them. We'll start with the sci-fi one, since Paolo is on a sci-fi comic show. And that's Deep Beyond issue number 8. And Dalfo Goy. Oh no, what was his name? How do you say his name? David Goy, yeah. Andrea Broccardo. Barbara Nocenzo. This is the Italian studio doing a U.S. comic here. And it's really getting science fictionist now. It started off post-apocalyptic. Now it's getting real hardcore science fiction-ish.
Good.
With some.
That looks very good. Very humanoids type stuff.
Yeah, it looks. The artwork is very nice. It's well done. And there's spaceship chases in this one too. Like I said, it started off as this post-apocalyptic thing. Then these people went down to the bottom of the ocean and discovered that there's some sort of alternate world that they can access through this deep sea base. But like the people in the alternate world are aliens, and they're really alien to us. and they've got completely different technology that seems like magic to us. And some of the humans that went over there are like our howdy, Dr. Silver Age.
Dr. Silver Age. He was also there with us on Wednesday.
So some of the humans over there are just like these sort of post-apocalyptic. I get they're idealist rebels kind of thing, but I don't even know what they're rebelling against. But a couple of them are like spies from the government, I guess, and they're real. And it's like they're really giving you sort of humans as assholes too in this, because it's like the villains are just like, why? I'm just like, why are you doing this? It's like they have to get secrets from these aliens so the aliens don't come get us and stuff. And it's like the aliens are leaving us alone. You're provoking them, but that's the way humans are. So
they're curious little monkeys.
They can't help it. But
that's the name of that show. 4-color fossils.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm the only non-fossil because I'm the only one under the age of 50.
Yep. He's so fossil adjacent.
So we're both sentimental and sedimental.
But I'm glad this was one I picked up on a whim. Mm-hmm. Like I think there was 1 week I didn't have many comics, so I looked around and I found Deep Beyond #1 still on the shelf. I thought it came out that week, but it didn't, because issue 2 was there too. So you know what? I'll pick up 2 issues of this and get, because I liked the art in it. And it's been a good solid comic read.
It's also nice to see a science fiction comic that's not tied into another property.
Yeah. And I really liked the turn into sort of much more science fiction-y than it started in the beginning, which was a bit more, post-apocalyptic.
So it's the exact opposite of Love and Rockets.
Yeah. Who did I just see got a love? Oh, it was Mercenaut got a Love and Rockets #1. First printing out that he was showing off. That just reminded me. What was I? God, there was some comic I wanted to show. It just flew out of my head. Something to do with science fiction. Oh, well. I'll have to remember it later. Maybe it was in this one. But I like these comic shop weeklies, too. They're a lot of fun to... Oh, and there's a new House of Slaughter, which is the Something is Killing the Children is coming out with a new first issue called House of Slaughter, where a spin-off where they show someone else. So if you want to get in on some
So I also have I also have a science fiction comic made by Italians here, and I showed this on Wednesday.
Ah.
That's really screaming early 1970s there.
Yeah, the cover. This is a Portuguese magazine, and the cover was made for the magazine, but the interior. It's a series called Year 2000. It was serialized in a newspaper supplement in Italy in the early 70s.
Ah, a newspaper supplement. Wow, a spirit.
Yeah. It came out in one of the top newspapers in Italy called Corriere della Sera. This one is done by two guys that I don't know, Mino Milani and Giancarlo Alessandrini. Oh. But that newspaper supplement was full of Milo Manara stuff, and it was historical comics and biographical comics that he was doing, not what you'd expect. And there was a lot of it. Unfortunately, most of that stuff will never get reprinted, not even in Italy. So they're kind of lost. You have to imagine that you're a comic collector and you're hunting for youth supplements of old 1970s newspapers. How are you going to find that?
You're going to find that on microfiche and libraries.
Yeah.
Like if you're a Scott Roberts collector, where are you going to find this?
Yeah, you're not.
Some random band in the room where I have all my CBDs stored.
I'll have to scan those ones in. Here's Geiger 80-page giant.
Mm-hmm. Those are new stories, or is it a reprint?
Yeah, Geiger ends at issue 6, and now they're putting out an 80-page. Well, it turns out what they're doing. They're doing kind of an Eternal Heroes thing. Because at the end of Geiger issue 6, where they're like, this is the last issue, and look out for Geiger 80-page giant, he introduced, what's the guy's name? Trash Can Man or something. Junkyard Joe was introduced in Geiger number 6. And in the back was this chart, sort of an Eternal Heroes chart, where there was a guy in the Revolutionary War, there was a guy in the Old West, there was a guy in the 1920s, there was a guy in the 1970s, who are sort of and Geiger, I guess, is one of these eternal heroes. So now they're going to do a Junkyard Joe series, and I guess they're going to do series with all the, he whatever they're called. He's got another name for them, but they're kind of the eternal heroes. Let's see. Nope. The American the mysterious man known as Redcoat, and reveal his bizarre ties to the American Revolution, the unknown war, and the unknown war is the name of one of the guys.
Is Junkyard Joe meaner than a Junkyard Dog, or is that just bad Leroy Brown?
I think he's got to be meaner than a Junkyard Dog, but I won't swear to it. but no more Geiger. If you want some more, who is that? Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch. So it's not. So the special is Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch. It was who drew Geiger? It was the one Jeff Johns did the After Watchmen series with.
Gary
Frank. Right. I that's the first time I noticed it's not Gary Frank drawing Geiger 80-page giant. It's Brian Hitch. Oh, okay.
Between Gary Frank and Brian Hitch, I'd rather have Brian Hitch.
Yeah, I like Brian Hitch. His stuff is good. I like Gary Frank too. I mean, I wouldn't be disappointed with a Gary Frank book. But I'll have to the comic that I've purged from my memory. Deadly Class. The series is ending. What issue is that? Number 49. This is its final storyline. Deadly Class was one of my favorite comics ever for 20 issues, and then I just didn't like it anymore because of a plot point. And I even got my issues are I think my issues are in Germany. Because right around the time of the TV show, there was actually some interest in them. So I'm like, you know what? I may as well sell these because I'm purging it from my memory. It hurt me so much that my because it's really weird because as an indie collector, I collect stuff to the end. It's like the books. I don't jump off books. Books end. Kind of thing.
Yeah, there's so many indie titles from the 80s and 90s that never actually ended.
Yeah,
they got short. I have so many of those, it's not even funny.
Even the long ones, I don't jump. I don't stop buying Tim Truman's Scout. As long as Tim Truman is doing it, I buy it. Then the series ends. I stopped buying Grimjack when Tim Truman left it, but that's a whole other thing. That if the creator leaves the book, I might leave it. But it's like I don't stop buying Terry Moore stuff. I like Terry Moore stuff.
This just reminded me of something. When we were talking earlier about why are people still buying, buying the new Fathom and the new Nexus and the new John Sable. But for example, recently we had the new Grendel miniseries,
right?
And that miniseries was actually compared to whenever they do a new John Sable or a new Nexus, the last miniseries that they had, they were not. You could read them without having read anything previously.
Yeah.
But you kind of feel like you're missing out on something, and that it would be better if you had prior knowledge. And the latest Grendel, it is a very good jumping on point.
There's also going to be a Grendel series on Netflix.
Oh yeah, they just announced that a Grendel series on a live-action Grendel series.
It is probably going to be based. Yeah, it's probably going to be Hunter Rose, and this Grendel, it features Grendel Prime.
I haven't read a lot of Grendel Prime stuff because a lot of that wasn't Matt Wagner drawing it. So there's an example of. I think you didn't even write some of that. There's an example of I stopped buying Grendel.
No, Matt Wagner wrote.
Matt Wagner accepted Grendel.
You're thinking of Grendel tales, which are set in that time period, but they don't feature Grendel Prime or Orion Asanti. They feature people inside the Grendel universe. Guys on the street, part of the Grendel army.
But they must have had some artists I didn't like, because at some point I stopped buying Grendel, like after issue like 40 or 50. I was on for a long time. Mm-hmm. But like Deadly Class is the only comic I can think of the last, 20 or 30 years that I bought 30 issues of, and the same creative team was still on it, and I couldn't stand it anymore and dropped it. That never happens. Lazarus is kind of like that, but I still want to read Lazarus. They just changed to a format that I don't like. So someday I'll get the Lazarus trade paperbacks, which means I'll probably never get it because I don't buy that many trade paperbacks. I'll have to look for it, but
maybe you just have someday it'll really, really old to read Lazarus.
Gore Vidal is here. Picked up Deadly Class, even though I'm 20 issues behind. Read it. Now I'm going to see how it led up to this issue. Enjoyed Usagi too.
So Gore finally got some class.
Yeah. Live action Grendel. They just announced it yesterday.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is it Netflix or Prime? Do you remember?
Netflix. I think it's Netflix. Yeah.
Netflix.
Yeah. By the way, Gore, you missed me dunking on Saga by a few minutes. It was the mandatory Saga dunking.
Here's another one I like the cover of, and another one of these long we now have comics with long titles all the time, especially indie ones. And this one is, who's it publishing it? I can't tell who's publishing. It's called Regarding the Matter of Oswald's Body. And there's the cover too, or I don't know if that's the cover or the splash or an ad page, but it's just a guy in a trench coat and hat looking down an alley kind of thing. It's very eye catching.
That type of title is acceptable in a novel. The reason why we don't find it acceptable in comics is because we're used to thinking of the comic titles as trademarks.
Right.
That almost kind of reminds me like an indie film poster.
You need a character's name in the title. That's what we think of when we think of comics. Yeah. Or something exciting like Action Comics. There you go. Mind the comic. I don't know that I miss Saga, but I'll buy some more Saga if it shows up.
I've never read it. So.
The POV is looking up out of a grave. Yeah, that.
Yeah, I read 4 pages of Saga, and that was enough for me.
4 pages.
But it looks like it's there's kind of brickwork or slats rather than dirt. But yeah, that is the POV looking up out of a grave. But it's not a dirt grave, so who knows? Maybe that makes it a little. What does it say here? The Kennedy assassination is a rat's nest of conspiracy theories, mafia involvement, the second government cover-up. But the most important chapter of this sordid tale may just be the theory that the body buried at Lee Harvey Oswald's Rolls Hill gravesite is not actually Lee Harvey himself. In Regarding the Matter of Oswald's Body, by Christopher Cantwell and Luca Casalanguida, readers will meet the ragtag group of useful idiots, in quotes. A wannabe cowboy from Wisconsin, a Buddy Holly idolizing former car thief, a world-weary civil rights activist ready for the revolution, and a failed G-man who still acts the part, are unwittingly brought together to clean up the crime of the century, specifically regarding the matter of Oswald's body.
Is that related to Department of Truth in any way?
I thought it was, but it's not. I'm like, this sounds like it should be because Oswald's a character in Department of Truth.
Maybe they're talking about that Oswald. I don't know.
Yeah, we've been infiltrated by BKV fans.
Now I know the path is a fossil.
I am a fossil, the youngest fossil in there.
It's a good thing our book will set the record straight, for sure. But I think that's one I might have to look into, just because the Department of Truth is good, and I like that image, that grave's eye view. That's not a grave.
Mm-hmm.
And Sleepy, you just missed us going over Geiger, the 80-page giant, which is drawn by Brian Hitch. And how after that they're doing other Eternal Heroes miniseries and not Geiger stuff.
Imagine if that came out in the same format as that JLA Heaven's Letter that he did, amazingly large.
One?
Yeah,
the Treasury edition. That'd be cool.
that thing is all bent in places. The one I bought, because I already bought it used, so it wasn't very good when I bought it, and then I put it in a way that it got even worse.
But now Vardell's going to be annoyed listening to spec channels talking about Grendel first appearance. But at least Grendel's first appearance is already a valuable book.
Yes.
I was never sure why.
Well, there is a specialized audience. There is still a specialized audience who are into anything Matt Wagner. It's like being a fan of Tori Amos.
I'm just saying. I've
read everything Matt Wagner's done except Grendel.
Yeah,
I don't know why. It just works that way. It's not a conscious thing. It's
Mage #1 isn't worth anything.
Mm-hmm.
It was for a while.
That's the one he's done. There's no other Matt Wagner book that's worth anything except what is that? Kimiko Primer number
2.
Number 2, and I just always found that fascinating because I've been a Grendel fan since a friend of mine introduced me to Grendel before I was into well, I actually did buy the first issue of Mage, then went away to college and missed out on Mage because I didn't see it in the I didn't have a chance to put it on my pull list, so I didn't start buying Mage till like issue 12. I was like, I'm going to buy it, and then I bought. But anyway, before I started buying Mage with issue 12, a friend of mine had the Grendel Devil by the Deed graphic novel, which was the collection of the stuff from Mage, the backups, and I really liked it. It's a really good graphic novel. So I've been into Grendel since then, but I never went back and bought the Kimiko primers. And I was just but I also saw them go up in price slowly and surely, and at the point now where they're a few $100s for that issue.
Right, because they're rarer than the ongoing series.
Yeah, because that's it. And also he swore never to reprint it, which eventually happened.
No, he didn't swear never to reprint it. What he said, it doesn't feel a compulsion to reprint it just to reprint it. So he found a good excuse when Grendel had a 20th or 30th anniversary or something.
Well, in 1988, he swore never to reprint it. Just like they swore never to reprint Grendel Black, White, and Red. That was part of the selling point of the Kimiko sleeve, but they reprinted that one too. I just know when someone swears something's never getting reprinted, it's getting reprinted eventually.
Unless you're Steve Ditko.
Now, what was that?
Unless you're Steve Ditko.
Right, but his nephew now is going to be printing his stuff out.
Yeah, you saw the comic book historians video with the Ditko Con?
No, I haven't watched that yet, but I saw it in my. I am not excited for the Geiger verse either, but I might buy some.
Comic book historians had a really nice interview with William Stout a few days ago.
I haven't seen that one yet.
It's a 2-parter. The second one hasn't come out yet.
Yeah, the Bud Plant one is going to spark controversy in the comic book historians Facebook group. I actually haven't seen what was Bob Beerbohm's reaction to it.
I was going to ask, is Bob Beerbohm like just have like one in the chamber ready to go?
Yeah.
Kirby's Machine Man is worth more than Commandy? Yeah. I don't even understand how Machine Man got valuable. That's kind of like nobody liked Machine Man in the 70s.
I don't think anybody liked Machine Man until the Barry Windsor Smith miniseries.
Yeah, exactly. And that was just tolerated. I don't even think anybody really liked it. It was just kind of cooler. Machine Man was just finally looked kind of cool finally.
I found it very cool, but I was 8 or 9. Because I remember why I found it cool. It was set in 2020. It was that Blade Runner type of universe, and I was a big fan of Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Universe.
And it had some nice Barry Windsor Smith art working over Trimp. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and now that our two literary commenters are here, Gore Vidal and Sleepy Reader, I'm going to have to bring up my thought from earlier about rare book collectors. I was saying we need a word in comic book that did, like in book collecting, they have rare book collectors and book collectors, and they're two completely different things. We need a phrase like that in comics. We maybe need more than that. As Scott points out, there's lots of different types. Because it's like
different subcategories.
Someone who collects really rare comics isn't the same as a comic collector who collects comics, and it goes to the shop every week or goes out looking for comics every week or every month or whatever, and buys, a stack full of, $5 comics. That's just a completely different thing than a guy who's buying Amazing Fantasy 15. So I want to hear what our literary guys have to say about that. We need more phrases for comic book collectors. Marvel books are always higher value than DC. Never made sense.
With a phrase that encompasses it.
Yeah, and even like as Gore Vidal said here with keys, even key book to me, like, key book collectors are sort of I call them wannabe rare comic collectors, but that sounds kind of insulting, and I don't really mean it to be. But like key book collectors would be buying rare comic books if they could, but they don't have the money for it. So instead of buying, $20,000 comic books, they're buying $200 comic books. And there's and if you look on YouTube, there's constantly comic book antiquarian. Yeah, if you look on YouTube, there's constantly new key issues being invented to satisfy the need of these key issue collectors who, they want $20 to $100 books. That's what they're looking to get.
One of the defining aspects of this, I see this in people that collect science fiction books, is to be in that upper realm, you've got to be rich.
Yeah.
There's just no way around it.
Rare.
I remember the first time I heard the expression minor key. And they're talking about stuff like first appearance of Gravity or whatever, or first. Yeah, but who cares about those characters? I mean, there are now people looking in previews to see if a new character shows up, and it's some lame ass character is going to be forgotten in 1 year. But they want to.
Who was it? Mr. Bloom? Was that the DC villain? It must be 3 years ago now. That like in Batman 43 or something, there's a new villain, Mr. Bloom, I think was his name, and everybody was going crazy, getting Mr. Bloom's first appearance.
I can't remember the character's name, but that new character that was introduced in Usagi, which made the prices spike on that one issue.
Oh yeah, that was weird.
When something like that happens in a book like Usagi Yojimbo,
yeah, that was strange.
Kind of interesting,
Yeah.
Minor key was always code war for this is supposed to be important, but no one can. But
yeah, because I have the first appearance of Gravity, but nobody cares.
Minor keys exist because, like I said, key issue collectors need key issues to collect, and because otherwise they've got nothing to do. Because they're not reading the comics, they don't care about the content of the comics, but they want to collect them.
I recommend golf.
What was that?
If they want to do something, I recommend golf.
There you go. Well, they might not have the physical ability to that with no true rarity. Yeah, and you don't
have to be. People don't play golf because they're good at golf.
Nah.
They just play it to have something to do on Sunday mornings.
I bet the rare comic book collectors play golf. Flame Overstreet.
Well, yeah, the real rare ones play golf. But Martin Goodman didn't.
Yeah, they also collect blues guitars.
Comics Mancer.
It's what is termed in some circles as the tan pants crowd. Lawyers that can afford hobbies.
And how many times on YouTube have we seen, key collectors? I guess that's what we're going to call them now, just because. But let's make a distinction between key collectors and rare comic collectors. I think that's what we have to do. There's collectors, key collectors, and rare comic collectors. And rare comic collectors will be the guys that we don't even see them. They're the guys who buy the $10,000 to $200,000 books.
Right.
And the key collectors are the guys who one day they'd like to be rare. They like the idea of collecting rare books.
Yeah.
But they can't afford $10,000 to $200,000. That's just crazy.
Right.
So the key collectors, but they constantly need new keys to collect. And how many times have we seen this on YouTube? We've seen some key, whatever I'm watching, because I watch a lot of YouTube collectors. They don't care about a book 1 week. Then a month later they find out this character is going to be in the Suicide Squad movie. So all of a sudden you have to get Polka Dot Man's first appearance, and it's now a minor key.
Yeah, and in 3 years it won't be.
Right, and you get it because you can, because it's a $10 to $20 book, which is the price range you want. You don't want dollar books. You passed over this book for I've seen people pass over minor keys for $1 because it doesn't interest them. They're like, and they'll even say, I passed over this book in the dollar bin 6 months ago, and now I just bought it for $20. Because they want $20 books. Agreed, Jared. At the new shop that sells only collectible comics, I'm known as the reader. Yeah, that's how the owner refers to me to most of his customer base who don't collect but read. Since
Gore lives in Texas, that reminds me there's a very famous video snippet of Bill Hicks does a routine about he walks into the diner or something somewhere, and they call him the reader. It's very...
Yeah. Rare comic collectors have temperature-controlled vaults and assistants to call in bids for. Yeah, that's a rare comic collector.
Harlan Ellison actually had a
connoisseur collector.
Had a room in his house. I've seen video footage. It's freaking amazing. Climate controlled, and the books were stored in roll-out doors like you'd have in bank vaults.
Yeah. So I've known plenty of book collectors. Yeah. That's great. I've known plenty of book collectors in my day, and they collect books like comic collectors do, in terms of they go to the used bookstore. Yeah. They buy 20 books and they know they'll never read 15 of them at least, but they just want them.
Yes.
And that's kind of what a book collector is, and that's kind of what a comic collector is. But a rare book collector is a different thing entirely, and a rare comic collector is a different thing entirely. And a key book collector, I think, is a different thing entirely. I'd love to know who just bought the original FF Kirby for $500,000 last week. Yeah.
It wasn't me.
Or who paid $3.50 for Amazing Fantasy number 15?
Yeah.
Because that went up. That's 3 times the price that it was going for.
And when you think about it, the reason we probably don't have the phrase rare comic book collector is because 30 years ago, the comic books, the prices have gone up so much.
Yeah.
That even like in 1982, you could get an Action Comics #1 if you had some money. You didn't have to be the uber rich to get an Action Comics #1. Mm-hmm. You could get an Amazing Fantasy 15 if you were just sort of a well-off collector who watched his money. You could get an Amazing Fantasy.
That's one of the fun things about collecting fanzines.
Now you can
look at fanzines came out even up to say like the early 80s and see just how much cheaper some of these things were back then. You could buy original artwork pages from Kirby for like $200.
Oh yeah. there are book collectors for special editions. Perhaps they're like incentive. Yeah, and also this just popped into my head too. Steel books for DVD and Blu-rays and 4K. There are people who collect steel books, and they're probably equivalent to the key issue collector sort of thing. They're buying it just because it's not okay.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. Channel Tales from the Flip Side is an example of key collectors. Yeah. Weekly, they discuss hot spec books, and almost all of them have some first appearance, or no matter how mundane.
I know a couple of guys from Tales from the Flip Side, because one of them is the guy who keeps specking on foreign editions.
Oh, they're Fantastic Giants facsimile edition, old Ditko art, and so I'm gonna have to look that one up. Let me write that one down so I don't forget it.
There's going to be a 40th anniversary edition of the artist edition for the Rocketeer that's been solicited as well.
I just saw the next Marvel facsimile edition that's not coming out till like December or something. It's going to be a Conan #1.
Okay.
Oh, the Barry Windsor Smith Conan?
Yeah, that'll be cool.
At least it's that one. I was wondering if they were going to start making facsimile editions of recent #1s.
Yeah, they did. I mean, depends what you call recent, but
last 20 years.
I find that with the slip covers is the other one too, because I watch a couple of DVD channels just for the heck of it. I like when anyone gets excited about anything, so I watch a couple of DVD hunting channels, kind of. And
it's funny you're talking about guys like us collecting books and DVDs and Blu-rays and what have you. Hardcore record collectors.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, they have us to pieces.
Right.
Talking like something that they only released 26 copies of in Italy in like 1972.
And as I learned on the Stern Show, because Baba Booey is a record collector, they call them pieces of vinyl, as you just said, pieces.
Yeah. And when they have a white label, the white label of this single came out just for these 2 radio stations.
And slip covers slipcovers on DVDs, I find amazing that they're collectors. Oh, this one's got the slipcover. Oh, it's got they always know. Unlike slipcovers, I want to throw those things away. They're so annoying.
Either way, I don't. If it has a slipcover, fine. If it doesn't, fine. It's
I wouldn't care. I mean, these steel books are nice looking.
I do like Blu-rays that have more complete extras on them.
Yeah, you like extras and stuff. You said that before. That's
definitely like the Criterions are really good examples of that. Criterion makes really good DVDs.
That is definitely a value-added thing. Yeah. As long as you like, as long as you like that stuff, that is definitely a value-added thing.
It's kind of like the absolute edition of a comic.
Right. But steel books. They're pretty. They're nice objects, but there's no value added to the movie watching experience.
But, I mean, it just goes to show that no matter how obscure something is, somebody out there collects it.
There's an interesting thought. I believe collecting is a denial of death. That's an interesting thought. I think
it's more an acceptance of death of your wallet.
Did a reissue of new #1s, pal, there called second printings. Or Bad Idea Comics calls them not first printings. That's what they put on their second printings. They're called not first printings, which was really confusing. The first Bad Idea comic, what was it? ENIAC #1. The not first printing and the first printing came out the same day. I was just like, what?
The number they not first
printing. Any work for them. And Roy at my comic shop was trying to explain to all the customers the difference between a first printing and a not first printing. And it was just like, what? But you got them both right here on the same day.
Yeah. Did it sound like bullshit? Then it was bullshit.
Well, now they put them out, when they call, when another printing is called for, they put out the not first printing.
It's kind of like that in
employment sense.
In History of the World Part 1. Have you printed any books today? Did you try to print any books today?
They don't want the second printing to feel bad. It's the participation trophy for the nowadays. For a lot of the key issue collectors, those seventh printings, they like them. When will Bad Idea give in and do trades? I have not heard yet anything about trades, so I don't know. I don't know when they're going to give in and do trades. I assume they are because everybody does. Because we were discussing before with the Grendel when he said this will never be reprinted, and the other times I've heard things will never be reprinted, and 20 years later or 3 years later they're reprinted.
And it's funny because there's some stuff people want reprints of, but they can't do it because they don't have the rights, like the ROM series from Marvel.
Yeah, yeah.
Micronauts too.
Micronauts.
They can't get the rights for that.
My issues of the Micronauts are in France. I sold mine a couple of years ago. I was like, you know what? I haven't read these in 30 years. I'm never going to read them. I always liked kind of having them, but I was like, I need the room. I need the money. Let's see if something, I got a decent price for them.
It was like with a title like Micronauts, they wouldn't take up a lot of room.
You would think so, but they do. I think because I had like all the I don't know. There's like almost 100 issues, but between the volume,
59 plus 20 plus the X-Men Micronauts miniseries in one annual.
Yeah, but there was a lot. Whatever it was.
There was a second. There was another series called the Micronauts: The New Voyages.
Yeah, that lasted for 20.
I was thinking 30 something, but.
But I think I can't even remember how much I got for them. Not a ton, but like $200 or $300, which is more than. It's amazing to me how for most of them being dollar books, except for a few of them, it wasn't too bad.
Yeah, true. I have a complete run of the Micronauts.
I'll just send these books to France for kicks.
Yeah, you sent the Micronauts to France, and France surrendered.
Yep. And I sent
just because the way Baron
Deadly Class to Germany.
I think France surrendered because the way Baron Karza was drawn.
It reminded them of the prison in the Bastille.
My paper girls went right across the river to White Plains, though. That's not nearly as exciting. There you go. You only use of Micronauts. Yep.
That is true. It's the first 12 plus the annual with Steve Ditko art.
Yeah, and those are the easiest ones.
That annual was the first place that I ever noticed any Steve Ditko art. I'd probably seen it before in like some Spider-Man treasuries and stuff like that.
Right.
But I remember looking at this and like, why is everybody so excited about Steve Ditko? This is not very good. And that work was not very good.
You know what? No, I don't know if it's the first place I noticed. It obviously wasn't the first place I noticed Steve Ditko art. But the first place I really examined Steve Ditko art, and I wrote a piece about it for our fanzine that never happened, because I'm the only one who wrote a piece for it, was first issue special with the Creeper. Issue 7, maybe, first issue special. And that was the first time as a kid, because I noticed how much it looked, because I knew Steve Ditko had done Spider-Man. I think I may have read the Spider-Man pocket books by then, but I spent so much time with that first issue special examining what Steve Ditko did when I was 10, or 11. What worked and what didn't work, and how much it was like Spider-Man and how much it was not like Spider-Man. And I was like, I was doing all sorts of investigating into that issue. But that's when I first really examined Steve Ditko art.
I think it was if it wasn't for that Micronauts annual, it was for the contemporary Captain Marvel story, which I remember because it was written by Archie Goodwin. It was a very good story, but it had nothing to do with what Steve Englehart had been doing with Captain Marvel before.
Spotlight?
Yeah.
Marvel Spotlight. Yeah, because Captain America had been canceled by then.
Mm-hmm.
Captain Marvel had been canceled, and I guess I don't know if they had the issues in inventory or what, but Marvel, they appeared a couple of. I remember buying those. They might still be on my shelf somewhere. Steve Ditko drawn Captain Marvel stories.
Mm-hmm. And that story was written by Archie Goodwin, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, I don't remember. And then the Captain
Because-
Universe came after that. Minor key, or is that a major key now? I don't know. First Captain Universe.
It's not First Captain Universe. The First Captain Universe is Micronauts number 4 or 5.
I think the Captain Universe showed up in Micronauts. You know?
Yes,
Before Marvel Spotlight?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't remember. I do not remember. I just remember the Marvel Spotlight stuff.
There was one issue there in the middle which features a character called Dragon Lord, which only appeared once or twice after that.
That, if I remember, that was one of Bob Wyachek's first inking jobs, Dragon Lord.
Seems to me like there was also an indie book that was called Dragon Lord too.
Oh, that went with that elf the Elf Lord stuff.
Yeah, those
Barry
things.
Blair?
Barry Blair, I think. Not by Barry Blair, but it was published by one of Barry Blair's companies.
Yeah, I remember that too.
Is that?
What was that?
Was that Aircell Comics?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why does this thing just bubble up out of my brain? I can't remember what happened 5 days ago. But all of a sudden, this comes out of nowhere.
So I agree. The first dozen my
weird.
Micronauts was always a solid comic. I always enjoyed it. Much like, and it had I think Butch Geist started out. That he did some work for it there. Pat Broderick did some nice work on Micronauts.
That was just like the first book I really bought with my own money, except for Star Wars, just because you got to see some really neat spaceship designs and things like that you didn't see other places.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the second comic I bought this week was Time Before Time. What is this? 4 or 5? Issue 5. I'm enjoying this storyline. It's a story about gangsters, corporate espionage, and time travel.
So there's these two. Going to be number 4.
That could be. They should. 3455. They two companies in different times have like time travel businesses. And I don't think the whole world knows about time travel, so it's on the down low. But if you're in the know, you can escape to another time. And it's like a corporate run thing.
Are the two companies aware of each other?
Yes, and they're enemies. They act like gangsters with each other. And they're like hundreds of years apart, too. And there's feuds going on between them. Mm-hmm. And there's one guy, our lead character here, just wants to get the hell out. He was an operator of a time machine. He just wants to leave. Right. But he can't, because it's like, you're in the mob. You can't just leave. They won't just let you. And they sent him forward in time in a real crappy time machine. But I hate when I'm reading something like this that I'm reading serially, and a character shows up, and I'm obviously supposed to know who that character is, but I don't. And I think the character from the first, and especially when the characters aren't all that. He's got this really stripped down Mike Mignola-ish style. So the characters kind of all, they don't look alike when they're standing next to each other. But when there's only 2 of them, you're like, which guy is that?
Right.
And I think the guy who showed up at the end of this issue was the guy from the first issue who something tragic happened to. But he showed up before something tragic happened to him.
That's one of the criticisms I had about the Mr. X series when it first started. It was very hard to tell some of the characters apart from each other just because visually they look very similar.
Yeah. Well, not the Hernandez brothers ones, I don't think, but after that.
No, it was whatever I was reading at the time. I'd have to go back.
The first 4 issues were the Hernandez brothers, and then I forget who took it over, but Seth took it over eventually too.
Now I'm just reminded of something. If we put Lex Luthor, Professor X, Spider Jerusalem, King Mob from the Invisibles, and Henry Bendix from Stormwatch all next to each other, can we tell them apart?
It'll be tough.
And then Picard shows up and said, "That's cute."
I'd hit my cough button.
This is why I'm drinking booze, not water.
You could put yellow dress on one of those guys and call him the Yellow Kid.
Have you ever read any Yellow Kid comic strips?
Just
I have not read
books
many
about comics. As
Yeah,
part of,
exactly.
like an article on the history of comics.
That is the only time I have ever read.
And it is, and was it Bob Beardbaum, I think, has actually proven that no, Yellow Kid was not the first comic strip, not even by a long shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe been the first popular one, but it's like I've never seen a collection of Yellow Kid comics.
Me neither. And every once in a while, they put out a Nemo in Slumberland, but never. Even Cats and Jammer Kids reprints are pretty rare of those.
Yeah. But Yellow Kid, never.
In comparison, there's lots of reprints of Little Nemo, and there's a hell of a lot of reprints of Crazy Cat.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, some of the more obscure stuff, there's.
And
I'm going to be reading time by time in one sitting eventually too.
Mutt and Jeff was reprinted a lot in the 30s and 40s, but it disappeared.
Right.
We talked about Ben Bowl with Cullen Murphy a few weeks ago. I hardly ever see any reprints of that anywhere.
Somewhere
all over the place.
Somewhere in the aughts, the 20 aughts, early 2000s, they started reprinting a lot of comic strips.
Oh yeah, IDW especially.
Right. I got some Captain Easy over there.
IDW has a nice collection, but before that, there were a couple of publishers that tried to do collections of Flash Gordon in the Phantom, but they have like 100 pages per volume. They're not moving forward like that. And the IDW's X9 Secret Agent Corrigan, that I only have one volume, and even that
I have all those.
Yeah, I only have one, but that has from 67 to 69. That's good. The Phantom one had like 2 storylines in there. Yeah, you're gonna get to the interesting stuff really fast like that. I don't even know how far along they went. I think I used to have the first. I know I have 2 Flash Gordon.
All the stuff that Archie Goodwin and Al Williamson did,
Mm-hmm.
and they also did another volume that was by Alex Raymond.
That just reminded me too. You know what? During that same period, a comic strip I bought that I was really impressed by was Dennis the Menace. I'd always heard, because I grew up with Dennis the Menace in the 70s, and it was fine.
Newspaper, sure.
It was fine, but I'd always heard artists, comic book artists, write glowingly about Hank Ketchum and his brushwork in Dennis the Menace. I'd never seen it before. When I finally saw I bought one of these little volumes of Dennis the Menace that I think Fantagraphics put out.
Yeah.
And man, his brushwork is nice. They're just so beautifully drawn.
It just dawned on me. I never thought about this before, but now that you brought that up, I can see that being an influence on Alex Toth.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Which is interesting. Speaking of Alex Toth, I was just... there was just a discussion. I think it was I saw on Eric Larson's Twitter, where and I didn't know this about Alex Toth. Near the end of his life, when did he die? He died, I think, in the 90s, but I think it started in the 80s when he was old. He became one of these artists who became paralyzed by his own expectations. And he couldn't finish anything. And he had someone posted this letter, because there's a book of Alex Toth's letters. I forget what it's called.
After you get done, I'll tell you about the guy that did that book.
But he's explaining it to this guy who that he's like, I'm so sorry, I can't get anything done. He's like, I can't get out of my own way. Everything I do I end up hating and tearing up. I don't know what to do. He was like, I don't. And it's weird to think of Alex Toth.
Who got that way towards the end of his life too.
Who?
Wally Wood.
Wally Wood, yeah.
Yeah.
But a bunch of people chimed in saying, yeah, that happens to me, or I've seen it happen. I was like, that's never happened to me, so I don't know.
That book you're talking about was done by a guy named John Hitchcock. Okay. He's the owner of a comic shop down in Greensboro, North Carolina, and he used to have some really good conventions with some crazy guest lists back in the 80s. I wish I'd gone to them back then. But he was at Heroes Con a few years ago, and he's got that one book that's published. Okay? I was talking to Bill Stout, and John comes up with like 3 big binders, like huge 3-ring binders, packed full of stuff. I mean, things were like almost to the point where they were falling out. It was all personal correspondence between him and Alex Toth. And he showed it to Bill, and I'm looking at Bill's face while he's going through this stuff, and his jaw almost hits the floor. And he's like, John, you should publish this stuff. I think he had plans to, but I think he's just got so much of it that editing it into a usable format to actually make a book out of is a lot of work.
And talk about a niche audience.
Yeah. It's all in that very distinctive handwriting style. Occasionally there'd be like a little cartoon somewhere. But
I find his handwriting hard to read.
After you get used to it, it's not so bad. It's kind of like being in a bath where it's too hot to begin with. After you've been in it a while, it's not so bad.
He used to have a column, I forget where, that he wrote in that handwriting. I used to be like, I never quite got used to it.
I got it. But just the sheer amount of stuff he had was like, that's just crazy.
He wasn't. He couldn't get any work done, so he was doing his correspondence. But man, that must be terrible not being able to get out of your own way.
I imagine that probably happens a lot to not only comic creators, but other artistic fields when you get older, that you kind of get this option paralysis, for lack of a better word.
Well, I think also what I've seen in it takes, as someone who's been making art his whole life, it takes a lot of ego and self-motivation to make art when you're not getting paid for it.
Oh, absolutely.
You have to convince yourself that it's a worthwhile thing to do. And that's not easy. Most of my artist friends haven't made anything in decades. Right. They've eventually, they'd love to, but, convincing yourself to is not easy. And with commercial artists, it's even harder when you're not getting paid to do something. To like when you're, there's a lot of especially drawing comic books is a job and a half.
Yeah.
It is a lot of work to draw a comic book. When you're young and getting paid for it, hey. But as you get older and you're maybe you're not getting paid for it, you're not picking up a pencil. I've known commercial artists who are like, unless I'm getting paid, I'm not picking up a pencil. And that's the way. And I think that happens to they get once you get older and you're commercial. Like most comic book artists are commercial artists, i.e., they're only doing it for the money is what's motivating them. They may enjoy drawing, but the money is what's. If they weren't getting paid, they wouldn't be drawing anything. Then there's guys who don't get paid and are drawing stuff. So those are the two ends of the spectrum. And I think the guys who and especially when you're like when you're on the top of when you're from 25 to 35 and work is easy to find and Marvel's giving you work, DC's giving you work, you're like, hey, I'm the man, I'm good. And then work slows down, and from like 45 to 55 you got work is extremely hard to find. And all of a sudden you're like, not the man. That is such a blow to the ego that I can imagine that can paralyze you from getting anything done.
It's rare that you see the opposite happen, where an artist like that will get more business as time goes by. There's a few that's happened to, but not many.
Yeah. And it's even more rare for John Byrne to draw 15 issues of the X-Men with no one paying him for it. That is as rare as it gets. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do that. It's kind of like he's made plenty of money in his career. He's been well compensated. So it's kind of like, I'm just going to draw what I want. And what I want to draw is the X-Men in 1982.
In Burton's case, I think it's easier because he knows how to write.
Yeah.
So we can whip up a story just like that. I feel like telling an X-Men story, and he can.
Yeah, but most people
Joe
it would never go past that.
Yeah, Joe Rubinstein lives off of doing commission recreations.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have to come up with a story.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, there's guys as talented as John Byrne who are never going to draw, 15 issues of the X-Men on their own. I mean, why would they?
Unless it's a passion project, you're not going to.
Right. I mean, Barry Windsor Smith has spent the last decade and a half drawing his passion project, which was monsters. It had nothing to do with the X-Men or anything like that. It's like I would think most artists were like that. If they finally had enough money to settle down and do what they wanted to do, and that involved drawing a comic.
If we didn't live in like a capitalist society,
mm-hmm.
what these artists would do as passion projects if money wasn't the driving factor.
Yeah.
Like,
that's why there's one comic. Oh, I can't remember the name of it now. It was a good I don't have it. I read Chris Giarruso's copy of it years and years ago. And it was one of these big indie graphic novels like Blankets, but I think it may have been around that time, maybe been a couple years earlier. And it was the whole thing was took place in a world where comic books were high art and comic book artists were respected. And it took place in this one little island country where comics were the most respected stuff. And they were like behind, and they hired all these comic book artists to do their passion projects and stuff like that. And like Jack Kirby had all these other creations that were his passion projects rather than Marvel and DC stuff. And so did everyone else. And it was an interesting book. I remember enjoying it. I wish I could remember its name.
It doesn't ring any bells. It sounds like an interesting book.
I've meant to buy it all these years, but I never have. But anyway, the one flaw in the book to me was kind of like all the guys that were in it were famous comic book artists. But I'm like, these are all the guys who thrived under corporate conditions. It wouldn't necessarily be the same cartoonists who thrived with passion projects, under non-corporate. So I wish they had made up a few other people too.
Yeah.
Right, you can expect Dave Sim to whip up something that is as good as Cerebus, because he was doing his passion project.
Right.
You would expect Dave Sim to be one of the big guys in this. Because he actually worked on his passion project. But instead it was, all the big Marvel and DC guys. It was kind of like, what? Those guys might not have been the same ones who...
Right.
Yeah. If they had given money to Jack Katz to do his passion project, he wouldn't have drawn like one issue of the First Kingdom per year.
Yeah.
And Dave Stevens got to do his passion project, which was the Rocketeer.
Yeah, they would have Rocketeer left and right. And maybe Eastman and Laird wouldn't have sold the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
From what I just read something was in the last couple of weeks that I don't think they've sold all the rights to the Turtles now.
Oh yeah, I don't think they have anything to do with it anymore.
They don't. They sold it back in the 90s.
I mean, it seems like I saw something within the last couple of weeks that even they don't have any licensing rights anymore, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they explained it on that Netflix TV show about toys.
Because I think the rights to the when Dennis Kitchen got that investor on Kitchen Sink, and they had merged with Tundra. I think that's around that time that Eastman and Laird lost or sold the rights to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because one of them needed the money. Can't remember which one.
Well, I don't even think they needed the money.
One of them did, because he wasn't good with finance.
Because I remember seeing them on some like mainstream talk show in the late 80s, because they were so they were unicorns, comic book guys who made it big, and they said something. They each made $100 million.
Yeah.
On the Turtles by that time.
And one of them wasted it, and the other one didn't.
Wow. How do you waste that much money? That's impossible.
But it's like you hear all these stories about like athletes and people that win the lottery, not just $1 million, like multiple $1 million.
Right.
Just sit and have nothing to show for it. Like, I don't get it.
Yeah.
Just go to Vegas.
You could live on the interest on that money.
Yes.
You could. They couldn't.
Yeah, but that's the thing. What's the first thing that people think of when they make money? Now I'm going to buy this. Why? Don't buy stuff, okay?
Because I can.
Yeah, but yeah, because I thought, what would I do if I won $100 million? Yeah, the first year I'm not going to spend any money.
Yeah.
Because no, not the first year, because by the second year, I would have about $2 million in interest that I can spend, and spending $2 million a year is fine, because I'm always making $2 million.
I'd buy the house I wanted, then I'd probably stop there.
Because I'm gonna buy I already decided I'm gonna buy a hatchback if I make $100 million.
Yeah, my needs aren't that great.
Yeah, of course. I'm used to test driving cars for a living, so I don't have that attachment to the idea. Oh man, when I'm rich, I'm gonna buy a Mercedes. Yeah, I've driven that Mercedes. You can have it. That's why I want the hatchback.
Mine, the comics, is buying Amazing Fantasy 15 with his millions. The third comic I got this week is Homesick Pilots, number 9. We continue our Gundam versus haunted house. Gundam versus our ghost-powered Gundam versus a ghost-powered haunted house. But we're building up to that. It didn't actually happen. We find in this one the haunted house. Homesick Pilots is the name of the band. The 2 people in the band are dead. The lead singer, this woman, became sort of an agent of the haunted house. It kind of took her over. And now it let her go, but it still wants her to come back. She's hanging out with one of the guys in the band, the Nuclear Bastards.
They're big rivals in Battle of the Bands? Oh wait,
they were, but then the haunted house. Then the haunted house killed most of them, and the rivalry kind of ended, but didn't. So now we've got one nuclear bastard and one homesick pilot who are hanging out, trying to figure out how to keep away from this haunted house, which wants her. Now, one of the nuclear bastards. Another woman is now the pilot of the Gundam, and I think like 2 of her band members are dead too, and 2 of the homesick pilots are dead. So she was kind of drafted into this sort of military thing that was developing this ghost-powered Gundam, big mech suit. So she's the one. So she was kind of going. This whole issue was about her and her going, I'm going to go kick that haunted house's ass. I have to do it. I have to stop him. And all the other people in the project are like, whoa, whoa, whoa. The point of this isn't for you to kick that haunted house's ass. The point of this is for us to test this, and then we give it to the real military guys to kick that haunted house's ass. And she's like, no, that's not going to happen. And then bad things happened, and we're building up to the fight, which I think is coming next issue. Was the first story arc was 5 issues, so I assume this one's going to be 5 issues. But it's been fun.
If you just read that description of the story to somebody who didn't know it was a comic series, they'd think it was the most gonzo thing they'd ever heard. This is like the Turkish Spider-Man movie.
Yeah. I was thinking they're going to merge the bands, and they're going to call themselves New Foo Fighter Order.
Have you guys seen Italian Spider-Man?
Parts of it.
I think you can find it on YouTube still.
Parts of it.
It was done in it was like back when internet video was in its infancy in like 2005, 2006. I think it was some film students in like Australia put it together. They put together this they called it Italian Spider-Man, and it's kind of it's done in the style of a 1970s Italian ripoff movie.
Yeah, it's a very Spider-Man kind of a style. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like Spider-Man, it's not. It has almost nothing to do with the actual Spider-Man except the name. It's this mustachioed, macho Italian guy who goes around fighting crime and punching people. And it is quite funny. I haven't seen it in a lot of years.
There are several movies like that featured Spider-Man's one of them, I guess, for whatever reason that other countries decided, hey, let's make a Spider-Man movie. But there's several movies in that vein. Some of them are really funny.
Yeah, but the Turkish one is the best because it's Captain America and El Santo fighting Spider-Man.
Yeah, the Turkish one is just gone through batshit insane.
Oh, and there's a scene in the Indian Superman when Superman is singing and flying and taking Indian Lois Lane out for a ride in the sky, and Indian Lois Lane is dressed like Spider-Man.
Well, Italian Spider-Man is a parody of those. Right. So imagine how zany it has to be a parody.
Mm-hmm.
It is very zany.
Serious MST3K material. Yeah.
But nothing is better than Indian Chuck Norris.
Huh.
There's a few of those that are just gonzo. God, there was one where they launched these guys from a catapult. And the way they landed, the way they kind of like separated like a multiple warhead missile as they landed inside of a castle somewhere. It's just like, this is the stupidest thing you've ever seen, but it looked funny at the same time.
Huh. The last comic I got this week is my old standby Usagi Yojimbo, and I really like this cover. It's got sort of the Japanese print fish on it.
That's
Usagi fighting the fish. Cover. What was that?
That's the Stan Sakai cover.
That's the Stan Sakai cover, yeah.
And it's very good. It kind of looks like contemporary Japanese art.
Yeah, it's very. I really liked it. You could tell he was looking at some stuff because it's different than his usual Usagi covers. And that fish right there is sort of a traditional big Japanese catfish that they've kind of been drawing for a lot of years in Japanese art. But it's got his cousin in it, that character who they actually made a second printing of a few weeks ago. So Usagi's hanging out with his cousin, this younger teenage cousin, and this is part 1, Ransom, part 1 of 3. And they run into a couple of characters who've been in another story, who's this, I think she's a teenager, the older one, and the younger one is like a tween, or even she might even be younger than 10, but they're thieves. And of course, they get Usagi into trouble because he's got a big heart, and these are 2 young girls who are having to thieve for a living. But they take advantage of him all the time, So story like that's going on. But
I'm a little behind on Usagi. I need to catch up with it.
Yeah, we're on issue 22 of 22 of the Color series already. It's been a while.
The last one I got was number 19, I think.
It's been a while. Carpacoi. Carpacoi. Ah, is that what? I think that's a. Hello, dudes. Is there an end game for Usagi Yojimbo? I don't. Not that I've heard of.
I've never heard Stan discuss an endgame in any interview he's ever done.
I just figure he's going to keep doing them until he dies at the drawing board.
That's my suspicion. I could be wrong.
That seems to be the way he's going. Unless he wants to, but that's his passion project.
Right, and let's think about this. Is Usagi Yojimbo the type of character that would have a happy ending?
No.
Right. So keep drawing it.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. So keep going.
I could see him having a melancholy ending, but not a happy ending.
Mm-hmm. He's a wandering Ronin, so I don't think he can settle down. His master is dead. Oh man, I've been buying Usagi for a long time.
Yeah,
since 1986 or so.
No, when I first started buying it. Sure.
I started buying it with
it was in
Usagi. Yeah, with Usagi Jimbo #1 was my first issue. I made because he appeared in Critters. He appeared in Albedo first, right? I didn't know anything about that. Then I think he appeared in Critters, and I used to see house ads for it in other Fantagraphic stuff. And I'm pretty sure I was like, oh, I want to check out this Usagi Yojimbo. He looks kind of cool. And then, but I never saw, I don't know that I ever saw, I may have picked up an issue of Critters or two. I don't even remember, or I never saw it. But I know I saw Usagi #1, and I went, boom. And I've been buying it ever since. I don't
remember where I first saw mention of Usagi. I don't know if it was in CBG or if it's somewhere else. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I don't know where. I saw him in Fantagraphics house ads. That's the only place I ever saw him until Usagi 1 came out. A lot of people discovered him with the Turtles and with that Turtles crossover issue.
And when Tundra was printing the series.
Yeah.
And they even got him featured in a Turtles cartoon. Turtle story.
Right. He became a Turtles toy, too.
Yeah, there was an action figure.
A lot of people know him from the toy.
I got that issue of Turtles just because Usagi was in it. I think wasn't that done by Mark Martin?
Which issue?
I don't remember the issue number, but I think
is it an issue of Usagi or an issue of the Turtles?
No, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But
okay, I didn't know he appeared in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles book.
Maybe I'm getting some things mixed up. I don't know.
I know one of the Turtles appeared in his book. I have that. Matter of fact, it's funny. I only realized, like 2 years ago, I have 2 printings of the Usagi with I forget which turtle was in it, Raphael, whoever. Because Usagi was on my pull list, and it was like issue 4 or something that the turtle appeared in. Got it with my pull list, read it, put it aside. And then it wasn't any time soon after. It was months later, maybe even a year later. Showed up in my pull list, bought it, brought it home, and realized it was the same issue I already had. I'm like, how did I get Usagi? And this is before. So this is like 1980, 8. Before second printings were a thing, really. So I didn't discover. So for all these years, I thought I had 2 copies of that, and it was just like 2 years ago. I was looking at them, and I was like, these copies aren't the same. The cover isn't the same. Slight changes on it. And I looked, and I'm like, oh, this is a second printing. I never knew.
Yeah.
So there's a first printing and a second printing.
And not first printing.
And not first printing, yes. Not
Going back
first.
to values of not first printings, I remember seeing from the Wizard Price Guide, Bone, the first issues had multiple printings, and aside from the first one, the second, third, and fourth of number one were more expensive than the other ones.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a weird situation too. I don't know what. Maybe because just certain ones had lower print runs than others.
Mm-hmm.
I think there may have been some minor differences, like the logo may have been a different color on a certain printing.
And then there were Image versions of when Image started doing Bone, Image reprinted the previous ones too.
Yeah,
that's how I was able to get them so cheap. I was late on Bone, but I got like the first 20 issues of the Image one for like $20 off of eBay. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't care that they were reprints.
I don't remember where I first heard about Bone either. I think it may have been a friend of mine from college who told me about it.
I definitely Bone. I heard about Bone, through the comic book press or whatever. Whatever. That one just came. I remember getting it hot.
Yeah. I know. I heard Maggie Thompson were also big fans, and they were pushing it.
Yeah. There were a lot of people who were fans of Bone. Wasn't Wizard a fan of Bone too?
They were.
They published some. They published like, was it Bone 1/2 or 0 or something like that?
I still
1/2. Yeah. I don't like bad. I understand why people make fun of Wizard, but it's all in good fun, and I don't want to badmouth Wizard because in practice they were actually a very good thing to have around.
I never liked Wizard.
In comparison, if you read things like Comic Buyer's Guide and Comics Journal,
mm-hmm.
it seemed to me like Wizard was written by a bunch of frat boys.
It was.
They weren't.
Of course, I was at an age where I would be where I was impressed with frat boy humor, because the first issue of Wizard I bought, I was 16. Wizard, but that wasn't the thing that was good about Wizard. Number one, they were available on newsstands, and even in Portugal, the first Wizards I bought were newsstand copies.
I think a lot of it's a nostalgia thing too. It's like if you got into it at a certain age.
But they were good. If it's your first contact with the ins and outs of the American industry,
right?
It's a good it's a good thing to have, because Fantagraphics was for the connoisseur. Comics Buyer's Guide is for the person that wants to be informed about something going on right now. And Wizard was for people like comics because they were fun.
If I was
even with the price guide.
If I was 14 years old when Wizard was coming out, I would have loved it. But I was, 27 years old and working at Marvel, so it wasn't that exciting to me.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But here is, I just reminded that this little thing.
You working
with
the
10th anniversary.
Yeah.
10th anniversary commemorative issue of Bone came with this little figure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you were in the industry. You already were an insider. You didn't need Wizard.
Exactly. That's what I said. I didn't like Wizard, but there was a reason I didn't like that.
My biggest problem with Wizard was the signal to noise ratio was way too high. There was some good stuff in there, but
you were too old.
I don't disagree with that. Yeah. I don't disagree with that.
You were if you had bought Wizard when you were 14, you would have liked it a lot more. That's what I figured.
Right, but I but even at the time, I understood that most of that thing was
fluff,
not interesting. Yeah, but when they wanted to do something nice, it came out nice.
You could.
So I suppose it was a good Wizard thing. It was a good thing to. It was a good thing to have. I was willing to go through the crap articles to get to the good ones.
And here, it reminds me of early 90s working at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
There are a bunch of us there who were video game fans because we were all in our early 20s. So we used to buy video game magazines. I don't remember, Game Informer, Electronic Gaming Monthly. There was a billion video game magazines.
And
we
you
used to
can
get
see all those now on the Internet Archive. Every damn one of them is there. Yeah.
Someone would buy it, and we'd pass it around the bullpen, and they were mostly fluff. I mean, 90% of the magazine was fluff. And you flip, but there was like one guy there, Thomas, who would go over it with a fine-tooth comb way more than the rest of us. And he would find interesting things in there that we missed because there was so much fluff. I think Wizard was kind of the same way. There was a lot of fluff. So you had to have the patience of an interested 14-year-old to get to the good stuff. If you were a jaded 24-year-old who thought he knew it all, you're not going to bother with Wizard.
And there was another magazine that was in that weird in-between situation called Heroes Illustrated.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It was a lot like Wizard, but I think they wanted to be more like, I don't know, it's like that middle ground between Wizard and
yeah, they wanted to do the same thing, but not in a childish way.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. There was a couple of magazines that tried to stake out that ground and failed at it.
So Hero Illustrated was like the Michael Bolton of comics magazines.
Middle of the road.
I'm just curious, where's the Michael Bolton Association coming from?
Yeah, he knows how to sing. He knows music. He just doesn't do anything with it.
Fair enough.
Michael Bolton reference. I haven't heard one of those in a long time. Man.
The last Michael Bolton reference I ever heard was Michael Bolton is truly revolting. He was in a metal band before anybody knew who he became.
Yeah, he became Michael Bolton because he found out he could make more money being a wannabe romantic singer than being in a metal band. Okay. Fine.
All right. Has anybody ever heard of the Ringo Awards? Oh, I guess they're named after Mike Wieringo.
Yeah, they're named after Mike Wieringo.
The nominees for the 21 Mike Wieringo Comic Book Industry Awards have just been announced. Nominees were selected via online voting for 2 of the selections, with the jury picking the other 3. Let's see. Best Cartoonist, Writer/Artist. We got Durf, Back Durf. I don't even know who that is, but I guess he or she does true stories.
I've heard of it, but I'm not really
Never heard of him. Mongie, Mongie. Stan Sakai. Well, you know who's getting my vote.
Right.
Rachel Smith. Adrian Tomini. At least I know him.
Optic Nerve. Yeah.
Optic Nerve. And Stephanie Yano. I think I've heard that word.
I haven't heard Tomini's name come up in a long time now that you
No. He did Loneliness of the Long Distance Cartoonist this past year.
He was kind of a darling creator to a lot of indie guys for a long time.
Yeah, in the 90s especially.
It just seems like, now that you mention, it's like, well, there's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, but Kayfabe interviewed him this year.
Did they?
Mm-hmm.
Who did?
Kayfabe.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he put out Loneliness of a Long Distance Cartoonist, his new graphic novel. So that's probably why he got it.
Didn't know.
But I imagine we're all voting for Stan Sakai in that one.
I mean, me personally, I would.
We talk about him all the time. Best Writer. Oh, I'm going to need Paolo's help on this one. Penelope, Bagieu.
Would go.
Bagieu. Bagieu.
Bagieu.
Mm-hmm.
Penelope Bagieu.
Yeah.
Anthony Del Cal, DEL, one word, COL, another word.
Del Cal, yeah.
Jason Douglas, and N.K. Jemisin. Oh, N.K. Jemison's got a picture.
N.K. Jemisin did that a Green Lantern spin-off, Far Sector.
Yeah, I don't know any of the. I don't know a single one of these writers.
I know she did something else that I don't know what it was, but I remember she was going to do something else.
Oh, Pardon me, some bad layouts here. The list continues on the next page. Marjorie Liu, James Tinian IV, and Ram V.
Okay. Let's go with that.
Go off on a tangent for a second. If you could, and granted you can't do it, but if you could separate the Green Lantern Corps from the DC universe and just put them in their own pocket universe, the possibilities on that are just limitless.
Yeah, that's what Grant Morrison did with his series. There were hardly any references to the rest of the DCU, and it was just Green Lantern doing stuff that nobody had ever had the guts to do with Green Lantern.
Gotcha.
Best artist or penciler? Josh Adams, don't know him. Jamal Campbell, don't know him. Elsa Charatier, Hansa Art, and Sana Takeda. Well, there's a little. I like this drawing by Elsa.
That last name.
Charatier. Elsa Takeda. At least I know she does Monstrous.
Okay. That's where.
Nice little drawing there.
Kind of Bruce Timmish drawing.
Yeah, very Bruce Timmish, David Mazzucchelli-ish. That sort of new indie style that everybody's been doing for the last 10 years. But I got to go with Sana Takeda only because she's the only one I know. Wow.
I was getting ready to say because I'm not recognizing most of these people, and if you'd have given me like a list of people that have been nominated for award back in like the late '80s or early '90s, I would have known every one of them.
Yeah. And here, best inker, Sanford Green. I wonder why he got best inker. He pencils and inks. He does. What do I get?
Bitterroot. Is that it?
Bitterroot. There we go. Brett Hobson. No idea. Jolie. JJOLEE. I don't know who that is. Gabriel Hernandez Walter. No idea. And TONCI, Tonsi, ZONJIC, Zonjic. I don't know who that is either.
I wonder if that's. I may be wrong, but I think he may have done, or he or she, I think it's a he, did some work on one of the Lobster Johnson series.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know a single letterer either. Duran Bennett, Aditya Bidikar, DC Hopkins.
Crazy. Spell that last name again.
Bidikar?
No, the
BIDIKAR.
No, the inker.
Yeah,
the inker? ZONJIC.
Okay, wow, that actually shows up in like the suggested search results. It's I was right. Okay, he did do a Lobster Johnson miniseries.
Okay. Mika Myers.
They've saw some of his work. Okay.
Chaz Pangburn, and Chaz spells his first name with an exclamation point at the end.
Like Scott Shaw.
Like Scott Shaw. He legally changed his name to have an exclamation point at the end.
That guy has in his website how to properly pronounce his name. It's pronounced Tonchi. The one. Yeah. Tonchi Zonjic.
Tonsi Zonjic.
Tonchi Zonjic. He has diacritics in the C, and that's what which you can't be reproduced in English language keyboards.
Ah. At least I've heard of two of the colorists for best colorist. Here's another one. Tonyin Ajetunmobi. Ajetunmobi. Tonyin Toyin Ajetunmobi.
Toyin. Toyin.
Yeah. Toyin Ajetunmobi. Okay. Laura Allred, Tamara Bonvillain, Aladdin Lee Grant Rutledge Collar. That's one name. He's got five names in one name. Aladdin Lee Grant Rutledge Collar. He's got Lee and Grant in his name? What kind of crazy?
Somebody in his family was a Civil War buff.
Yeah, but you don't pick the Union and the Rebels.
Aladdin Lee Grant.
Aladdin Lee Grant Rutledge Collar.
Like
Is that
Jerry
hyphenated?
Gustav,
No hyphens.
Toth,
5 names. Jacob Phillips. Oh, I know him. He's Sean Phillips' son. Joe Todd Staten, a hyphen in Todd Staten, and Christian Ward. I think I've heard of him. How is it that I've heard of more colorists than pencilers and inkers? Wow.
No,
I think Sleepy Reader's right. The colorists have become more important.
I find it interesting. There's no mention of Dave Stewart there.
No. Or Paul Mounts. He's another one.
Or,
he colors a lot of Amanda Connor stuff. He's really good.
Or Lauren Kandinsky.
Yeah. Best cover artist. I've heard of some of these. Giancarlo Bernal. Haven't heard of him or her. Gian.
Giancarlo him.
Stephanie Hans. I've heard of her, but I can't think of any of her work. Man House. Man with 2 A's. Steve Lieber. How'd he get in there?
Steve Lieber?
Steve Lieber, best cover artist. I mean, I like his work, but I don't. Is he a cover? I don't know. Peach Momoko.
Yeah, I saw a Steve Lieber cover just the other day. I wasn't expecting it. Was a DC superhero book, and I thought that's interesting. Not something I would have expected from Steve Lieber.
Here's another strange name, Kevin O'Neill. Probably my favorite artist on this list, but cover artist? What has Kevin O'Neill done cover art wise lately?
Wasn't there a new League of Extraordinary Gentlemen miniseries?
Yeah, maybe that. And Joe Todd Stanton again. You got best colorist and best cover artist. Oh wow! And the best series, 2 of them are by someone named by some company named Webtoon. I don't even know they exist. The best series nominees are the Department of Truth from Image. Guess I'm picking Far Sector from DC.
And that's the N.K. Jemisin series.
Lore Olympus from Webtoon. I don't know that one at all. My Deepest Secret, also by Webtoon. Maybe you could do a voting campaign. Usagi Yojimbo, I'll vote for that one. And Wonder Woman Dead Earth.
This is good to show you how out of touch I am with the current comics market.
Yeah, I'm not even going to read the rest of this stuff because I don't even know all this
The thing about Far Sector, he had some good ideas, but Jemisin is not very good with personalities. The personalities serve the whim of the story, which is
what book we were talking about earlier?
Hmm?
Was that the Green Lantern book we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, Far Sector.
Yeah, the whole rest of these 9 sectors is a whole bunch of comic books we've never heard of. I mean, just one after one. I heard of Billionaire Island at least. There's one. Like best humor comic, Metal Shark Bro 2: Assault on Hamzig Island by Scout. I don't think I've ever seen that one.
No.
There's a lot of not seen stuff in here. Best nonfiction comic work. There's a Grateful Dead nonfiction comic.
There is?
Yeah. Grateful Dead Origins by Z2.
Okay.
I don't know if that's... Tim Truman did some Grateful Dead comics in the past 5 or 6 years. I don't know if that's associated with that or not.
I have no idea. There are so many comics out there. It is amazing. It is amazing how many comics are out there because, all of those best of stuff I've never heard of.
And in another month, there's going to be 52 Batman titles just in 1 month.
And I go to the comic shop every week and I look for comics. So it's like, and I haven't heard of any of this stuff. And I buy my fill of comics every week.
I used to when I had a budget for it, but now.
Yep. You'll get your budget again.
Well, like I said,
Hopefully.
back in the late 80s, early 90s, I would have known every person they did considered nominating, and now it's like, I don't know any of them.
Well, then what we're going to do is a Rip Reader Tear from the 90s. Let's see. I think I have one here. Let me... Ooh, I think this is August 1993. Number ones from DC. And these are going to surprise you because I don't know.
From Bloodlines.
Let's see. Share.
Are these going to have some like neon green graphics on them?
Window. There we go.
Is Hitman going to be there? Of course, Vertigo was launched in 93.
We've got Streets #1, Golden Age #1, and Lobo. Is that Christmas special? Convention special #1.
I have 2 of those.
Wow, you have 2 of those? I would expect everybody to have just the Golden Age out of these.
I have the Golden Age and I have the Lobo Convention special.
Okay.
Which is actually pretty funny. It's a parody. But,
wow.
Looks like a parody of martial law.
Lobo was supposed to be a parody of the excess of the 90s.
Yes.
That's what Lobo started at.
And everybody missed the joke, which is a joke in itself.
Yep. And everybody loved it because they loved the excess of the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I'm going to slap Golden Age, read Streets, and rip Lobo.
I don't even know what Streets is. I was surprised by
it. Either.
James D. Hudnall. I don't need to know anything else.
James D. Hudnall.
You have to agree that is a good way to choose.
I have to agree with Paulo just because I've already read 2 of those.
Yeah.
I've heard the Golden
Age is better than the convention special, and I just read the other one just because I haven't read it yet.
I've heard everyone praises the Golden Age, but I've never read it.
It's good.
It is.
But I think I'm gonna read that and slab Lobo, and have to tear up Streets.
That's a James Hudnall comic that I didn't know, and I have to read it. The Golden Age, the Golden Age is the first Reconstructionist book.
Where they're looking at the past and rebuilding it, kind of thing.
Yes, that is exactly what's going on. You remember the Reconstruction. Even though people talk about the 90s, the deconstructionist era was the 80s. By the time we got Image, there was nothing left to deconstruct. So those comics were pure, like that's why they were Image, and there was the joke that they did. Maybe we'll put out a new comics company called Substance. Some writers said it.
Right. Did Golden Age come out before the 1963 series did?
May have been.
I think it did, but I'm not 100% sure.
I'm not, and neither am I. But nobody thought it. I don't think people were considering 1963 to be even nowadays. I don't think it can be considered reconstructive.
I mean, it was more of a tribute letter to Marvel in 1963.
Yeah, but more even if it was not intentional, just the artwork that was inside was turning it into a parody. Well-intentioned parody, maybe, but it was still parody, mostly parody. The Golden Age has no parody at all. It's a serious story. It's one that acknowledges that superheroes are gods with feet of clay, and that they have to pay a price for the way they act.
Yeah.
And that's how it began. First it was the Golden Age, then it was Marvel's, and after that Grant Morrison does the new JLA.
I missed Gore putting
oh gosh, I haven't seen the comments.
Paolo in a timeout for mentioning Michael Bolton.
No, you have to listen to Michael Bolton to know why you must hate it.
You don't.
Yes, you do.
No.
You always have to listen to hate it, which is why I still like Woodpeckers from Space.
If we lived in a perfect world, I would write a computer micro or macro where every time you got Rickrolled, it would go back to this person and play Painkiller by Judas Priest instead.
But that's not fun. The fun is getting Rickrolled.
No, that's not fun. That's like cause for violence.
What would you rather listen to? Woodpeckers from Space or Holiday Rap?
I have no idea.
Woodpeckers from Space was a Dutch produced synth pop hit. They were supposed to use the image of Woody Woodpecker but couldn't secure the rights, so they came up with a woodpecker from space that doesn't look like a woodpecker, even though they still use the sample from the woodpecker cartoon.
I think I'd rather go back and listen to Musical Youth if that tells
And
me.
Holiday Rap is two 80s European guys with mustaches pretending to be rappers to the sound of Madonna's Holiday. While singing the song The Summer Holiday.
Still better than Bjork, I'll give it that.
And we're going from August of 1993 to August of 1986. And I picked these three indie ones because I actually bought all three.
I have two of those.
See that we're right in Scott's wheelhouse.
I bet you can guess which one I don't have.
Ms. Tree.
You're exactly right.
I am in a conundrum.
And so am I, because I actually bought all three of these.
And I haven't read any of them.
It does make your opinion different when you've read some of these before.
I just came back and getting vertigo from this diversion.
So, I haven't read any of these three, but I want to read all of them, which is the problem.
But you can't get vertigo from Eclipse, can you? You can only get it from DC, right?
That Scout, which issue of Scout is that? I don't even remember number 10, Ms. Tree Summer Special, and Alien Counters number 6. But yeah, that's a.
Okay,
Like
I'm going to slab Alien Encounters.
That I could see that, because that'd be a popular one to slab, probably. That'll have the most eye appeal and the most appeal to a customer, because it's got Marilyn on it and a nuke.
So I'm going to read Mystery, because everybody keeps telling me how good it is.
I think Scout's better than Ms. Tree. Reading-wise, I'd say Scout is better than Ms. Tree.
And theoretically,
Ms. Tree too. I read it. I like it.
But, and for me, given my personality and my normal taste, Scout would be more appealing than Ms. Tree.
Right.
Ms. Tree is.
I feel like I have to.
Ms. Tree has Bobby Darin in it. That's a tough one. I made a tough one.
Like I said, it's very different approaching this when you've read some of these books, because you know what they are.
Like I said, I'm sexy women on each cover. Read Alien Encounters, Scab Slout, Rift Tree. Ooh.
If I hadn't read any of those books before, that's probably what I would do.
Yeah.
Having read them, I would read Ms. Tree just because I haven't read that one. I mean, that's just by default.
I don't want to rip Scout.
It's really a toss-up, and I would hate to rip up Scout because I love Tim Truman's stuff.
Gonna have to rip up Scout.
That's really a toss-up, 50-50 to rip up either Alien Counters or Scout. I mean,
you know what? I changed my mind. I read Scout and I rip Mystery.
Ah, okay.
Okay.
Wow. No Bobby Darin story for him.
No Bobby Darin story for me.
I think I just decided I want to read Ms. Tree. And I'll slab Scout and rip up Alien Encounters. That may be a mistake. Maybe a mistake ripping up that Alien Encounters.
The only reason
I do like that Scout cover, though.
The only reason I'm reading Ms. Tree is because I haven't read it before. Otherwise,
I personally like that Scout cover better than that Alien Encounters cover. But I know that Alien Encounters cover slabbed will sell before that Scout cover. So it's kind of like,
But I am not. I am not happy with any of the possible outcomes.
No, like this is a tough one.
I will
Yeah.
have to say, I don't think
I'm
it's
ripping that Alien Encounters.
Right. But if you got the issue
That's
of
my
Scout
final.
that had the enclosed record in it,
Flexi
the mini disc, flexi disc, it would be hard to rip that one up.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to watch me rip up a record.
I hate the idea of slabbing almost as much as ripping. Yeah. Well, I hate the idea of ripping more, I have to say. Because at least I doubt I will ever slab anything, but I'm not never say never. But at least in my mind, in this game, I could slab something and I'd sell it off and make some money doing it. Or else I'd slab it and hang it on my wall because it'll look cool.
I think I'd have to rip up Scout just because I remember more about it than I do the other ones.
Okay. So each of us ripped each. So you ripped Scout, I ripped Alien Encounters, and Paolo ripped Mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me.
That's a much tougher choice than
because they were all indie books that I like.
Yeah, and you'd think that I haven't read either of them. You'd think that actually would make it easier, but it doesn't.
Yeah,
because I am curious. I am curious about all of them.
For both Alien Worlds and Alien Encounters, the series, having some truly god-awful coloring at times.
Yeah.
Yes.
It seems I don't know if I'd call it
clothing something in plastic. Is that what?
Sometimes it's a craft project. Sometimes it just becomes an obsession with a number and an obsession with being right. It's kind of like, oh, look at this comic. I bet it's a 9.8. Bet if I send it in, it'll be a 9.8. I think that's sort of a driving force too, where you want to be. This is something you can be proven right at.
If you're looking for validation of your own opinion,
right?
Yeah.
And it is so rare we get to be right at anything. We get to be validated. We get to be right. But if you're a comic collector, and 9.8s are important to you, and you're like, I like this comic a lot. I think it'll be worth something as a 9.8. Bet if I send it in, it'll be a 9.8. And you get it back, and you're like, I was right.
It's like the opposite of most jobs. There's a quantitative number there that actually means something.
I love this. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. I love this so much. I'll never look inside.
I don't. The thing about slabbing books too is they were never going to get read anyway. It's either an expensive book, which you're never going to read. You may as well read a reprint or a trade of it, or it's some variant cover that you bought only for the variant cover. You if you want to read it, you'll buy the $4 version and not the $50 version.
Put me inside a room full of slabbed comics, and then you'll be out a lot of money. I am going to crack open those seals, baby, and use my grubby hands to read those comics.
You fiend.
Yep.
I'm a criminal. I should be arrested. Reading comics. Whoever heard of that?
But I also know, like,
maybe a criminal.
At least one guy, John, who works at the comic shop, he actually cracks open his slabs, because that's where I got my cracked slabs from. That I'm going to do something with someday, I swear. Is that like he was Thor is his favorite? He was collecting old issues of Thor, but he didn't want them in there. He wanted them raw, but he bought them in slabs because that's how you. If you're buying Journey into Mystery 92, it's in a slab. So that's how he bought it. He got it, cracked it open right in the store, and now it's in his collection raw because he wants to be able to look at it. But, I don't know how many people are like that, but I'm sure a small percentage are.
I'll be back in a minute.
Okay.
So I can figure out how to...
We're probably going to end in a minute, so we'll wait for Scott to come back to end. Slabbing. Yeah, I still haven't slabbed anything. I'm not like Slab Crack.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Sleepy Reader, that's Comic Crack's new name, Slab Crack.
CGC Crack.
Or CGC Crack, that's what I was calling him. He's getting addicted to CGCing books.
Mm.
So he's going to have to use that as his name on your show. CGC Crack. Have you ever slabbed a book, Paolo?
I'm not. No, and I have no idea how much I would have to pay just to ship it, and then.
Are there any grading services in Europe?
Not that I know of.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd need something large to accommodate the albums.
Yeah.
Here's the funny thing: the most expensive book right now in Europe is Tintin in Congo, which is not Tintin's first appearance. That is Tintin in the Land of the Soviets. Tintin in Congo, the last time I looked, was worth 39,000 euros, which is about $43,000. So, wow. Yeah, you have comics going for millions in the USA, and in Europe they're 43,000. But there's the funny thing: Tintin in the Land of the Soviets is 30,000 euros, which is about $35,000.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the album. Now, in the USA, if I explain how this was published, in the USA, the album would be considered a reprint.
Right.
But in the European context, the album is the real product, and the pre-public and its appearances in the newspaper supplement are the pre-publication. They are not the real thing. And that's a collection. A collection of all of the newspaper supplements where Tintin in the Land of the Soviets appear was only 900 euros, $1,100.
Wow.
So the album, which in American parlance would be considered a reprint, is worth almost 30 times as more as the pre-publication.
Wow.
You know how we talked about collecting different formats earlier. Does anybody even talk about ash cans anymore?
Occasionally I see them pop up, but not really. You can't get them graded. Well, you can. I'm wrong. You can get them graded, but I don't think anyone cares that much. I was listening to a discussion.
They were like hot for a few minutes in the late 90s. And then
the first appearance of Shang-Chi, where a guy was proud of his 9.8 and hoped to get $20,000. I asked about the interiors. He didn't know. Yeah. Well, that's a book. If you get a 9.8 first appearance of Shang-Chi, you never open that book. Gore, comics have lost all original meaning for these people. Yeah. That's just the way they're objects. They're valuable objects now. They're not comic books. And I understand that. I mean, you can read a collected edition or reprint of it if you want. You don't have to read the original anymore. So if you've got a 9.8 of Shang-Chi's first appearance, you slab it and never open it and just sell it to the next guy and read your 6.5 first appearance or your facsimile edition.
Every Master of Kung Fu Epic Collection Volume 1, it's got all the original stories.
Exactly. That's it's trading
and
cards.
It's only $40.
Yeah, some of those essential collections that never got reprinted are pricey these days.
Yeah.
Someone
gave me an answer.
To me, everything should always be available in a reprint. I'm going to always defend that.
Yeah, I got no problem with that.
What if the book's really, really bad? Should it still be available?
Then the market won't want it. What book is he showing us?
It's that Exterminator 17 I talked to you about. So even in a Portuguese context, this is not the first appearance of Exterminator 17. It's a more modern reprint. And I can read it. It's a classic. It's a classic. And funny thing is, it's not usual for one-shots in France to become classics, to become perennials. But this one did, and it's kind of in the context. Either they're oddballs or they have a context because the author is primarily known for one-shots and the author is popular enough. In this case, it's both. This is an oddball, But Bilal, the artist, is popular, so you can put it in the context of a Bilal collection. It's like when for artists like there's a collaboration between Milo Manara and Hugo Pratt, Indian Summer, which gets reprinted in the context that they're both popular, but it's a one shot.
Right.
And even Edgar Pierre Jacobs, creator of Blake and Mortimer, gets reprinted all the time. And then there's a book called The U-Ray. It's very, very bad. But because Blake and Mortimer is popular, that comic gets reprinted. It's also a one shot. So
well, after that lesson in European comics, it's time for us to sign off.
Do you remember that comic I showed once that Howler Mouse like the cover? FM.
Oh, yeah.
That's Spanish. Yeah. And that's a one shot.
Yeah, I do remember.
Okay. All right. Everybody have a good night out there. Any last words from anyone? I'm getting tired, so you two must be really tired.
Well, I am.
No, actually, I thought I would be tired by now, but I'm not.
Yeah, you were talking at the very beginning how you were tired. So, and Paolo's up in the middle of the night. So,
the thing is,
night, everyone.
I was kind of expecting getting off work at 10 p.m. to unwind, and then I would go to bed later. I'm actually feeling tired earlier than usual for getting off work at 10 p.m. Then I wake up at 6 something when I should be sleeping in.
Right.
Okay. And Wednesday nights on whose channel are you on again?
Graphic Man.
Graphic Man's channel. Okay.
The show is
Wednesday night.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure going to be there every time, but there's a group of people, and whoever's available can jump in. The channel is Graphic Man, and the show is the Four Color Fossils.
Huh. That describes us.
Shang-Chi collector began reading comics in the 80s. He doesn't read them anymore. He loves the comics and films and just A lot of people don't like the comics anymore, but they still like speculating.
I felt so out of place because I can't remember if it was on Twitter, it was on Facebook. Baltimore Comic Con had posted which book would you like to be seen made into a movie or a TV show. I'm sitting there thinking, none of them.
I got no answer to that. I like my comics. Yeah. I like my comics as comics. They're fine that way.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I was like the one kid off in the corner by himself that wasn't very popular. It was like,
I've never been able to answer that question either. All right.
Yeah.
Everybody have a good night out there. We'll catch you next week.
Goodbye. Bye.